for this triennium. As it is our first meeting, I would like to ask Monty Morrison, our cultural advisor, if he would commence our meeting the Te Aroha way, indeed our Rotorua way. Thank you, Monty. Kia ora.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Merepeka. Koutou rā tēnei te mihi kawana kia koutou, I tai mai mo te nohonga tuatahi. Just to welcome you all, of course, as part of the new triennium this year. Me kei te mihi atu kia kōro koutou I tai mai, Shirley, Phil, me ana rawa ko koutou ko Eugene, tēnei ka mihi kawana, and pe atu ki tēnā kia Raj, tēnei te mihi kawana kia koe anō. Nō reira tuku atu ki tēnā, and with that, can I say our karakia to begin our session today. E te atua nā I homai o mana ki tanga kia mātou. Tēnā a mātou ina tēnei kia koe. Hei manaki hei te ake kia mātou a mātou whānau. Me rātou e tautoko ana mātou nei. Lord, we ask you to bless us this day. Friends and family who support us in all that we do. In our work in serving our community. We ask this prayer for Christ our Lord. Amen. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you very much, Monty. Just so that we can start off as we mean to continue over the next couple of years during this triennium, could I ask please that you turn your phones off, your mobile phones off, and take them off the table. You will be aware that we have had a number of workshops, and during those workshops it has come home to us that we need to be fully present at our meetings. So I would just ask please that that happens. And what I will ensure is that every 1.5 hours or thereabouts that we take some time to actually allow you, take 5 minutes to allow you then to catch up on any messages that might have come through. So if that would suit. Yes, Mr. Berman Kemp. Thank you very much. Thank you. So, yes, Councillor Maxwell. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. So with that out of the way, we can get underway. So apologies then just from Councillor Tapsell for being late. Sorry? Tina? Oh. Oh, so thank you. I beg your pardon. Thank you. Thank you. So it's been moved by Councillor Tapsell and seconded by Councillor Donaldson that the apologies from Councillor Tapsell be for lateness be accepted. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you. Carried. Are there any declarations of interest, please? Thank you. Urgent business? Yes, Councillor Stewart.
Chair, last week I understand that a confidential agreement between Mr McPherson and the Rotorua District Council was entered into regarding and providing a confidential agreement over the petition that he lodged with Rotorua District Court. I understand an official information request has been denied, and I think, Madam Chair, that we as elected representatives should have confidence in our confidential process at the end of the meeting, that we be briefed on what that confidential agreement was. However, Madam Chair, I do find it a little bit ironic that an individual who used leaked confidential information last year then wanted to keep out of the public arena the information and the confidential agreement. And I also want to know, Madam Chair, whether it's a late item under Finance, about the $8,500 of legal costs that this council incurred to defend 2 staff against an alleged defamation case. So I'll put that at the end of the meeting, or I'm in your hands, Madam Chair, in terms of the CEO advising us in confidential regarding the matters that were agreed to at the court.
Yes, thank you. I will take some counsel from our CEO because I think this is not a matter that we are required to make a decision on. So just if you just bear with me a moment, please. Thank you. There will be some comment provided in closed session with councillors.
Will I get an opportunity to get an answer to the question regarding whether the $8,500 of legal accounts has already been, the council has been reimbursed.
Thank you. That'll be included in that. Thank you. Thank you. So now we'll move on to our staff reports, and we've got a number of them. We're going to have an interesting meeting, I think, this morning. There's a number of reports coming up where I'm sure you'll have some comments to make. So thank you. Our first report, the smoke-free outdoor spaces. May I have a mover and a seconder, please, to receive the report, Smoke-Free Outdoor Spaces Policy. Thank you. Councillor Donaldson, moved Councillor Donaldson, seconded Councillor Bentley. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you, carried. Now, who was Rosemary? Thank you. Good morning, Rosemary. Good morning, Kia ora kōrua. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou, councillors. This policy I will take as read, but just a few points to make about it. Council has had a smoke-free outdoor places policy with some listed places in it for a number of years, and in the recent years there have been a number of requests for us to extend that policy. And there had been some surveys undertaken. The most recent one was one with almost 600 responses taken over last summer, and that showed pretty extensive support for extending smoke-free places. I guess the other sort of point to make to you is that the Smoke-Free Environments Act is not something that we override. That's something which sets some rules around open places, for instance in eating places and buildings, and defines what an open place is for eating places and so on. So this policy has been proposed to extend some areas and to do that in a way that is around providing increased awareness and promotion of a positive smoke-free message, around decreasing people's exposure to secondhand smoke and visibility of smoking behaviour for children and young people in particular. And the feeling is that we're following public opinion on this. You'll see from the surveys there's quite strong support, including from, we've broken that down by New Zealanders, New Zealand visitors, Rotorua people and overseas visitors, whether people, their smoking status, and looking at a number of different locations. And one of those graphs shows you that, that even across a number of locations, there are some very strongly supported. For instance, our playgrounds that have been smoke-free for a number of years. I think there's very, very strong support that that's accepted and you don't smoke in playgrounds anymore. And it's not something that we need to control. It's something that people understand from some subtle signage and from the social signs about where it's okay to smoke and where it's not. So really like to just leave the report as it is, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Yes, we'll take questions please at this point, and leave the discussion until we open it up after question time. So it's questions to Rosemary on clarification or others. Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I note that the recommendation is to introduce extension of the smoke-free places in 2 phases. I wonder why we have to go to 2 phases. Why don't we just get on with it?
That's a very good question. I spoke to colleagues through Healthy Families, some of our coalition partners here, and spoke to the Lower Hutt City people, and their comment was that it's actually quite hard to do the awareness properly and effectively, and it does take some time to get the message across. And the feeling was that if to announce it and do it all at once was actually quite difficult and hard to do effectively, and it would be better to concentrate on particular areas, and that's why sort of the reserves and those kinds of areas are grouped together in the first phase, and then the more inner city stuff in the second phase. That it was just a matter of practicality, ability to do it effectively.
But don't you think that would actually add to confusion as to where they can and cannot smoke? Isn't it better just to say none of these areas, period?
I guess it could be something if people thought that we should be doing it all at once. My concern is just the practicality of being able to actually do that messaging effectively.
And a final supplementary. I note here that you've said that going out to phase 2 needed to go out to further consultation. Is that necessary, or can we make the decision without further consultation?
I think you could make a decision. I've had a very early discussion with the Eat Street businesses and with some of the inner city retailers, as well as the consultations happened with the public through the surveys and so on. I think there's quite a bit of work to do to actually work out what are the displacement effects, and in practical terms, how do we manage that safely and effectively. Nobody's wanting smokers to feel ostracised. It's around finding a safe way of managing that so that we achieve the policy purpose. So that might be having some designated smoking areas and exactly where do we place ashtrays and signage to be effective. So I think there is a bit of work to learn from people actually in those spaces about what will be effective. One of the comments from one of the inner city retailers was that if we made, for instance, really extensive smoke-free areas, that it might actually push someone into smoking. His example was right next to the gas main at the back door. So I think there are some learnings to work through with the public and with businesses about how to do it effectively.
Thank you. Councillor Gould?
I noticed with your report, I've got a couple of questions, but it's to do with compliance with the policy as voluntary and not enforced by the council. Does it mean that the previous smoke-free policy is not enforced by the council? I'm not talking about phase 1 or phase 2. And the other question is with phase 1, you've got all sports grounds. Does it include the buildings on the sports grounds? And you've got the Rotorua International Stadium. Does that include the whole of the International Stadium and all the grounds surrounding the International Stadium?
Sorry, so the stadium, yes, the intention is that the entire facility would be smoke-free and surrounds. And I guess my intention would not be to put signs up on every physical surface we can find. It'd be a bit more subtle than that around the messaging at events and sort of signage on the way into certain places, things like that. Sports grounds, yes, buildings, I think most of those buildings are probably what I would expect that most of them are smoke-free anyway. There's a lot of already compliant buildings and people choosing to make things smoke-free ahead of this policy. We're kind of following rather than leading public opinion on this one. And as far as the enforcement goes, my understanding is that there's not really a need to enforce, and that it's kind of socially managed, and that it becomes that if nobody's smoking in a place, nobody else actually lights up there either, and people tend to have more permission then to say, actually, excuse me, would you mind not smoking close to me? And I guess it's not about really saying too strictly, you must not smoke here, but just be aware that actually, is this the right place to smoke? Are you around other people? Are there children watching? Those kinds of things. So it's trying to set some social some social norms really, and resetting those.
Councillor Tapsell?
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you, and thank you, Rosemary and Amy, for this report. It's very exciting. I've had a few concerns from some residents on what the impacts of this policy will be on business and also tourism. So tourism being a key driver of our economy, they're a bit concerned on what the perception will be to visitors if we go out there saying we're smoke-free, yet a lot of them that's quite accustomed to them, they might perceive that if they come here they're not allowed to smoke at all. In terms of business, particularly around Eat Street, there are a lot of concerns. We've got some fantastic bars down there, and what will the impacts be on them, and then where will people be able to smoke down Eat Street?
Okay, two great questions. So I guess the tourism visitor thing, this is not about enforcing it, it's around setting some expectations, and I think it is also about finding where will people will smoke, so where will they smoke and how can we facilitate that it doesn't impact other people adversely, rather than really driving that home. Having said that, when I've visited overseas, there's other customs that you follow in the place that you're at. For instance, Singapore, you don't chew gum or cross the road in the wrong place. There's things when you're visiting another place that you do actually comply with their rules and what's normal in those normal customs in those places. And I don't expect this to happen overnight. It will take time, but I think it's just it's a slow process in the direction to be taking. With regards to businesses in Eat Street, so I visited there with the Ministry of Health representative and a Rotorua public health representative, and the category, the way they assess an open space, they've been waiting for a particular assessment tool to be able to look at that effectively to say whether that fits with the Smoke-Free Environments Act or not for the open eating areas. And the feeling was that most of those eating areas actually don't comply with the Act. So regardless of what this policy might say, there's still a Smoke-Free Environments Act that they have to comply with. And the recommendation, as mentioned in the paper, is that the Tour Order's recommendation to them was that they should work with us on a voluntary way of managing smoking in that area, rather than actually having a formal measurement and possibly being given a notice to comply in a much shorter time period than what's proposed in the policy. So I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. I think Eat Street and other areas, I mean, there are arguments, or sorry, there are views that we heard expressed when the legislation was first introduced, and our worship will know about that. Councillor Hunt, then Councillor Bentley.
Thank you. Mine was following on from the designated smoking areas, because I note some of the comments coming through. So in the phase 2, that feedback will be sought so that there can be a collaboration of that decision making with those businesses affected. And I just wanted to make a comment about the tourism. Certainly Long Mile, with the buses of tourists that went down there, that was a major problem with tourists getting out of the buses and smoking. That has actually stopped significantly with education, so that they smoke on the bus and don't get out near the redwoods. And although there are others that have a problem, often locals, I think for me it's recognising that we're shifting from a punitive, and it says at one of the junior rugby club I see that they've put up smoke-free times, and that's actually been really successful. So we're moving from that punitive aspect to being proudly smoke-free, and that takes it away from the fact that we're trying to make people feel bad, but we're actually celebrating our health and our success. So I think if we turn that around, that conversation, to being proudly smoke-free, more and more people will buy into that, because the statistics speak fairly clearly in support of that. So I'm happy with the two phases, but I'll wait for that debate to continue.
Councillor Bentley, then Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Hunt's just said what I was going to say, so I just congratulate Rosemary on the report.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart.
I'm one of the dying breed that are still an active smoker, and I find this partly offensive. However, the smokers in this town also self-manage, and many of us will not smoke in Eat Street where there's food. But what you're creating, and what this Act has created, is areas that are parts of our city where smokers now congregate in a concentrated area, and they are absolutely disgusting. I think this is just going beyond belief. It is socially managed by smokers. Smokers don't like being pointed out or victimised either. And for example, the netball courts are totally smoke-free. Nobody smokes down there. But up behind the kiosk, there is people are smoking. So I agree that maybe Eat Street needs to come on board, but I also hear what Councillor Tapsell is saying. I notice you've avoided the lakefront reserve because, like the redwoods, and they still smoke at the redwoods, Councillor Hunt, you've avoided the lakefront by the children's playground, where all the Chinese tourists come in their 40-seaters with their things at the back. They not only smoke there, they smoke outside the bathhouse. They smoke in Tarawera Street as soon as they get out of the buses in front of the eateries that they want to frequent. So what's happened with the Smoke-Free Environments Act, which I generally support as a smoker, is that you've now got smokers who are very, very conscious of where they participate in what they choose to do, and it's their legal right to choose what they want to do. They now feel victimised. So I think you've avoided the lakefront in the option 1. You've only got council-owned playgrounds. You haven't got leased council reserves, because a lot of the reserves are leased. They are council-owned, but they're leased to clubs and organisations. So you're going to stop them as well. So if someone wants to have a smoke in the car park down at the hockey pavilion, this is going to stop it. I mean, the smokers are getting to the stage where enough is enough. The trends are downwards, and the Smoke-Free Environments Act has achieved a huge amount in such a short time. But victimising smokers, I believe this is what this is going to do. And quite frankly, option 1, I would like to see Eat Street in phase 1. I don't think smoking should be anywhere near any eatery areas. But how are you going to police Erawera Street or Amahia Street, where they pull outside the places that they go to eat, and the whole busload is smoking? So Councillor Tapsell's point of the cultural aspects of our visitor industry is also important. You also go to Rainbow and Ferry Springs, and all the tourists are smoking in the car park there as well. So yes, put it in. It's going to be self-governing. I accept that, but you must also accept that smokers are also socially managing their issue, their problem, and they certainly don't need smoke police going around and telling them where they can't and they can do it. Most smokers are considerate and responsible, and I just leave it at that. I will be supporting the motion, but I just make those comments based on my own experiences and those of fellow smokers. We choose to do that, like some people choose to be alcoholics and drug addicts, and there's certain laws covering them. I accept that, but someone has to police it. So
Thank you, Councillor Stewart.
I'll just put those views.
Thank you. And thank you. It's good to hear from someone who is actually a smoker. Thank you. Ms Morrison?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, some of the issues that Councillor Stewart just raised gets me thinking about the leased reserves, particularly ones like Polynesian Spa. And I'm just wondering, because that doesn't look like they're in there, how could or would you be able to influence or have this policy flow through into those contractual arrangements that you have with those organisations? And has that been considered as part of the rollout?
Yes, so it has. So could I just clarify, the lakefront reserves are included, and so that part of that last stop point in phase 1, that does include the lakefront reserves. And in response to your question, and again, all agreements for the hire or rent of council premises and reserves or receiving council funding for events would be required to include a smoke-free event clause. So I think it is moving there. I think, and I guess I take from what Councillor Stewart has also commented, that actually most smokers do actually support a number of these smoke-free places and act responsibly. Most of the majority of smokers also act responsibly, and again, this is really following what they are saying about what areas should be smoke-free as well. I don't think anyone's going to bother with somebody who is smoking in a place that's not bothering somebody else. It's really to stop it from bothering other people. But I think, yeah, it does need to be worked in through all of the lease arrangements and things with the events team and others as that goes along over time.
And just one supplementary. I had a sort of a query in there around the definition of public buildings, but you clarified that in the discussion around all the definitions are from the Smoke-Free Environments Act. I was curious then around why that the reference to the legislation hasn't been included in the policy, and only the central government policy statement around Smoke-Free 2025 has. Just in terms of definitions, it just makes it easier, points people back to the legislation.
Okay, so we could do
consistent.
that.
Yeah, consistent. I think you mean.
Thank you.
Thank you. Your Worship.
Yes, it's questions only, so I'll keep my debate till later. How realistic is it to work through the issues? We can see that the issue is Eat Street. It's not the other areas really. How realistic is it to work through those issues in Eat Street with those owners by January 2018?
I think it's quite realistic. When I met with them, they were coming up with ideas on the spot and things about what they could do together, what the issues might be and the different ways of addressing them. They often they could tell me what time of day particular groups of patrons came in, where they tended to go, and so on. They had a really clear idea, and I think that the solutions would be coming from from them as responsible business owners.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I think it is a case of working together with them to make sure that we arrive at some suitable outcome. Councillor Bentley, then Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wish to point out to Councillor Sturt that on page 21 it's got all the areas that are included, which includes the lake.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before I continue, is there any particular hand that I need to raise for you to have a better from your peripheral vision?
No, thank you. I'm usually on to it. Thank you.
Okay, super. Thank you. My point is that the changes in smoking regulations over many years has affected my business, so I have seen quite a few decline. A lot of people are now becoming more socially responsible, if not financially. It's not helped, and there's going to be another price increase coming soon, so that'll affect another, but for every 10 that stop, there's another 10 that'll probably start. But what I'm saying is that although it affects my business, I mean, I do support smoke-free environment. I'm not likely to want to take my kids around in a food eating place and have somebody blow smoke on me. Most of the people that go into this type of particular areas are more reasonable, and they're very educated. They're not stupid or fools that they will do this stuff like that. My point is that it does affect some businesses in particular. We give them licenses to operate and then tell them that they can only operate under such conditions. Scotty's Bar, or whatever the new bar's name is, the Brew Bar. And if we are to divert them from going to smoke from the Brew Bar to a particular area, what is the health and safety that we are providing for them in a corner alley or in a side street or whatever? I think those factors have to be resolved as well. As for the tourist buses, we can't be too draconian on them because they are the bread and butter of our lifeline. And but they do. When owning my Nando's restaurant, it did annoy me when the buses used to turn up there and all would be making noise in front and smoking and throwing their butts around. So education process is very important as well. Just putting harsh laws and not enforcing it is not the solution. I do support it though.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Thomas?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question about the council-controlled reserves and public spaces, and you've mentioned the lakefront reserves. I have a concern perhaps around the public reserves out around the other lakes rather than in town. I think a lot of people that are out in those areas, they're pulling off the side of the road and having a picnic, or they're getting out of their boat or whatever, and they're not really considering whether it's a public reserve or just a beach on the side of a lake. And I think those are perceived as a long way away from council control. So I wonder if it would be worthwhile thinking about moving the public reserves outside of the urban area into phase 2, so there was more time for that education and maybe working with TELT or other organisations around the lakes.
Yeah, at this stage I'd included all the reserve types of places together but I certainly take your point that it's possibly it's a different communication to address those things. And I think that's where we need to work with our other partners around the other parts of the communication campaign and how we get that awareness raised, because it's not just about signage and it's not going to be obvious, and it would also be really ugly if we had smoke-free signs on every possible surface and all those environments. We don't want to be doing that. It needs to be a smart way of getting the message across. But I'm still fairly confident that it should be in the first phase. But I think it is working over that year. I think it's not, it won't all happen on the dot of the 1st of February. It'll be a work in progress and learning as we go about what's effective.
Just a supplementary to that, I would hate to see signage out around our lakes. We have enough signage out there telling people what they can and can't do, and they are uncontrolled areas in general. And also, I do worry that in terms of rolling it in by February 2017, a lot of our residents out in the lakes areas are part-time residents. They might not know about this until they arrive the next time they come to their batch in May. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell?
you, Madam Chair. Having been a non-smoker all my life, and that, you know, I don't want to be too cruel on the ones who find it hard to give it up. But I think we're working in the right direction. I mean, 10 or 15 years ago, when our mayor was involved with this policy and everything, I think she was the most hated woman in New Zealand. But now, I think that's changed, all's changed, and so I think, so we're looking at the two-phase approach type of thing, yeah. I think we just keep working steadily at that and work towards, I think in the end, a lot of our own public will thank us for it. I think this is something that is working, but it's how we go about it, and I like the approach that's here. Kia ora.
Thank you. Mr. Berryman, Cam?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Look, thank you for the report. First of all, I'd like to mihi to the Smoke Free Coalition for pulling the data and finding out the information, because I guess what is quite clear is the majority of the population that we serve are actually pro this, as indeed are the majority of the businesses too. And just my final comment on that was that I do remember in a previous role that I had, this council I think might have been the second or third in the country to actually start with smoke-free signage in its parks and in its at the redwoods, at the parks, and I had personal experience of, at that time, watching a lady at Hannah's Bay, I think it was, go to the playground there, light up as soon as she got out of the car, put the child into the playground. As soon as she got to the fence in front of the sign, she put the cigarette out. So again, it's that thing, and just to talk what Councillor Hunt was saying, this is about proudly promoting Rotorua as a place that aspires to be smoke-free, as opposed to a punitive measure. So I'm very comfortable with this and happy to support.
Thank you. We have strayed a little bit into discussion rather than just sticking with questions, so I do beg your pardon on that. So I'm going to open it up in a minute for well, actually I will open it up now for discussion. I know we've had some of that. It does appear to me that one of the problems will be, Rosemary, that we have locals who smoke, and then the overseas visitors, and I've seen them as well. And to go up to them and say anything, you're likely to get a smack in the, well, I think you might anyway. But the other thing also is the hospital. I mean, I go to the hospital quite frequently, and you see people in the hospital, and there's signs everywhere. So we're trying to educate people, but sometimes, you know, you can do the best thing in the world, but it might not necessarily get through. So discussion, yes. Your Worship?
Yes, I'm supportive of this, and that shouldn't be surprising. The Smoke-Free Environments Act was a public health act, and it was a long journey. It began with Tuku Roirangi Morgan, let me remind everybody. I only picked it up in '99, and it came through in 2003. It is about incremental change. It's not about punishing smokers at all, as slowly society's stopping smoking. And I think that I really like this. I like it for the outdoor spaces. I'm really comfortable about that. Get that in, get that bedded in, and I just can't quite get my head around why we're saying January 2018. I think get this step through in phase 1, which I'm totally supportive of, and then when the time is right, when you think you've implemented, and I know you need to time frame something so the signal is there for Eat Street and other outdoor pavement eating areas and the markets and the entrances, when you think it's the right time, bring back that paper. So I would rather say in 2018, when you yourselves, with the Public Health Coalition, with all of those public health providers that you're working with, think we're getting there. Signal 2018, because it's incremental. But you stage it, you stage it, you stage it. And the end stage is a lofty stage, which we have all agreed to, actually, in our sustainable living strategy. So we have said that health and wellness is a prime priority for our community. So I support this. If there were concern, I would suggest an amendment that we signal 2018 for the report to come back to council to say, yep, we're now ready for phase 2, and that's total support of phase 1, and that may be more palatable to people to think, you'll bring back a report to us. Yeah, 2017. Yeah, so that you've got that time framing for commencing phase 2. So you're saying we're going to carry on. It's one step, get it socialised. It's not about enforcement. It's not about smoke-free environment officers punishing people. It's about them helping people work through getting the next phase in. So I'd like to support it in total, but if people were feeling that that's a bit, too fast, then I'd say bring back a report at the end of 2017, signalling when you want phase 2 to roll out.
Well, the report as it stands suggests January 2018. So what you're just saying is, I don't see the need for another report.
I agree with you, Madam Chair. It seems to be approval round the table. The one sensitive point is
the time.
About the year, but our council officers feel quite confident that it's achievable, and you're working in the field, and that's really encouraging that you're working collaboratively, and people think yes, this can be worked through by then. So I'd support it, but if it was a strong move, I'd recommend you come back again at the end of 2017 and tell us how it's got on.
JP, would you like to add a comment?
Thank you. Just in response to that, and it's a very good question, the way we had discussed it was that Rosemary and the various stakeholders would work with particularly the Eat Street operators, and we can certainly bring back progress updates through O&M. So if there was an option for them to move more quickly to implement this policy, we would signal that to you through the O&M operations report. I think the key from what's been proposed here is that we really do need to work with them collaboratively to understand the displacement impact. Certainly for a lot of businesses and a lot of organisations, and we experienced it ourselves when the building went smoke-free, when we removed designated smoking areas. The displacement effect meant that suddenly we had people smoking at the front doors or the back doors of the building, which is actually even a worse impact for people visiting the organisation. So we need to work through very constructively with the Eat Street businesses about how that's going to work. So if we're able to come back earlier, we will, and say that it'll happen earlier, but we'll give you that progress through O&M.
Do we need to have an amendment that to point 2 that a report be brought back, or do we take that as a given?
Well, I think we've discussed that now. Our officers have heard, and I think we don't need to put that as an amendment. Great. Thank you. Councillor Donaldson, then Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So like Councillor Maxwell, never been a smoker. I did have the unenviable job in the police of being the workplace smoke-free implementation officer, so I got my share of hate mail. But for me, this legislation's never been about stigmatisation of smokers. It's more about having empathy for smokers and encouraging a healthy change in their behaviour, but recognising that each individual can make their own decisions. I'm also unconcerned about the effect on tourism. If anything, I think this strengthens the 100% pure brand. There's a lot of other things we could do in that regard, but this is one. And I do approve of the 2-phased approach and socialising forthcoming changes for key areas such as Eat Street and the markets. So, full support.
Thank you. Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. While we go away banging on this and support this decision of non-smoking, does this cover e-smoking as well? Because we had an incident a couple of weeks ago in the council at LGNZ meeting where the chair during his break decided that he was allowed to smoke that. So I approached our events duty manager that day and asked him what the policy was around the council building, and he said he didn't know and he was going to get some advice on it. And when I approached him and I said, look, it's doesn't seem right for you to smoke in this environment, even though it's an e-cigarette. And he goes, who's going to stop me?
Yes, well, I mean, the e-cigarettes. I know there's in the report you do actually mention e-cigarettes, but they seem to be coming under scrutiny as well these days, don't they, Rosemary? You might like to comment.
Yes, so the advice that on the Ministry of Health perspective is that e-cigarettes should be treated for the social behaviour that they mimic cigarette smoking. So for that purpose of trying to stop people seeing it as normal to be smoking in public places, that they come under the same category as any other kind of cigarette. The other concern with them is that what's actually in them is sometimes worse, but they're often not known, and sometimes there's nicotine, sometimes there's other substances, but they're not considered, it's not known what's in them, so they're not considered safe to be in public places either.
Thank you. Councillor Gould.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm supporting recommendation 1 and 2. I note that with the report it says compliance with the policy is voluntary and not enforced by the council. And also note that in the future, when this policy changes, that it is enforceable, then we will have problems, and we don't want to put off overseas tourists coming to Rotorua because of the smoke-free enforceable policy.
Thank you, Councillor Gould. I think what we're trying to do really is to change the behaviour of locals rather than tourists, but take your point. Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Unlike some of those around the table who've never smoked in their lives, I used to be an exceedingly heavy smoker. I spent half my life smoking heavily enough to actually reach 60 a day. I've spent half my life trying to stop smoking, and I've spent the rest of my life celebrating the fact that I've finally managed to kick the habit. And I seriously think that any incentive to people who are hooked on this disgusting habit has to be positive. And you've only got to look at the fact that in Rotorua the number of smokers is much higher than the national average to realise that smoking is actually linked to the poorer members of our society in a large number of cases, and it is largely contributing to the dollars that they are able to spend on food and everything else. This is not a police rule, it's not a police state. This is common sense saying smoking is socially unacceptable, smoking is bad for you, and anything we can do to help you kick the habit is positive. So I'm very happy to support this motion. In fact, I'm quite prepared to move this recommendation too. Thank you.
Very much, Councillor Kent. Councillor Hunt.
I'll second that. Councillor Kent's moved that. For me, I very much support this. For me, it's about reducing second-hand smoke from a health point of view. For children, the elderly, asthmatics, New Zealand as a country has high respiratory issues for people, and these are exacerbated. We have enough pollen in the forest to deal with respiratory conditions without exacerbating that by second-hand smoke. It is a shift in public perception from the rights of smokers to smoke wherever they feel like it, in the same way we had the rights of drinkers to drink wherever they felt like it, and the ongoing effects that had for everyone around them, to a shift that actually it's really the right of people not to be inconvenienced or have health issues from someone else's choice. So it is a shift in public perception. It is about being proudly smoke-free. It's normalising healthy behaviour over unhealthy behaviour, and for some it is always personal choice, and for those who do smoke now, that's a personal choice that they make, so I have no judgment on that. But I do want to support places for everybody else to go out, and we know that hospitality increased when smoking stopped in bars. Many of those places would have closed down because a number of people had stopped smoking or didn't start smoking, and they were not going out, they were not socialising. And I know virtually everyone of my social circle would not go out socialising if there was smoke there, and will actively leave. They'll vote with their feet in their chequebook. They'll go to another bar, another restaurant, another cafe if someone lights up. So people are making those positive choices. We know as a country we have a lot of tourists coming here for our clean green and the healthy outdoors, and the healthy outdoors is a smoke-free environment. So while many of our visitors are heavy smokers, again, when in Rome, when in Rotorua. So ours is going to be a proudly smoke-free environment, and you're welcome to come, but these are our rules, and I think that that's a fair thing. It's not going to be policed. This is voluntary, and it has worked extremely well as a voluntary measure in the places we have already instilled it. Yes, there are obviously people who don't continue, who choose not to do that, but the vast majority want to follow the guidelines and the expected behaviour of the community that they're in. So I fully support it, and I think that banning e-cigarettes is an extremely important aspect, in the same way that for those who are old enough, the cigarette lollies were very popular for children. And again, that normalised the behaviour of smoking. So to ban all of those things that look like smoking is a cool thing to do is a very, very positive step. So, and a very good report. I'm happy with the rollout. I know we'll get the updates in the O&M, and I think if there's any reason to shift that date for phase 2, then that will come through in that feedback. So thank you for your report, Rosemary.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hunt. Yes, this is one way that we can encourage people to reduce their smoking. Unfortunately, we put very little effort into actually looking at the causes as to why people actually do have the necessity to smoke. We tend to be reluctant to do that. I'm not talking about us, I'm talking about in general, but that's really where some of the emphasis should be going in the future. So yes, I'm happy now we've got, Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When I first got this report, I was a little bit upset and wondered how far we are going in terms of telling people how to live their lives, and very interested that we had a policy that was looking at our residents' behaviour instead of actual council operations. But I put it out there, and I had well over 100 comments in return, and the majority of Rotorua was actually very happy that we're going to have this policy, in particular the ones with children. Rotorua people have had enough of taking their children to parks or walking their children to the library and having to walk past people that are smoking. One of the concerns that came back actually, and I had a wonderful young lady that said to me, well, if we're so concerned about the health effects of secondhand smoking, why aren't we doing enough with car fumes? Why aren't we looking at other environmental impacts if we're really concerned about the health of Rotorua residents? So I'm excited that we do have this now, and I just hope that if we're going to start going to smoke-free outdoor spaces, we won't take it too far in people's rights. It is a very fine balance between the rights of people to smoke and the rights of people to not be affected by others that are smoking. But I'm happy that we're doing this in terms of people's health benefits, but I would like to see more. If we're looking at people's health benefits on not only the secondhand smoke, also car fumes and anything else that is environmentally damaging to not only the environment but also our health. So just thought I'd share many of the comments that I had written return.
Thank you. And it's great that you do go out and canvass, and so you get a real sense of how the community feels. Thank you, Councillor Tapsell. Well, I am going to, we have had a mover and a seconder. Councillor Kent has moved, Councillor Hunt has seconded, so I'm going to put that motion, the recommendation for a new policy extending smoke-free outdoor spaces in 2 phases be approved. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you, carried. Thank you. Recommendation 2, our Waste Management and Minimisation Plan, Waste Strategy 2016 to 2022. I'd like to call for a mover and a seconder, please, that we receive that report. Thank you, Councillor Gould. Thank you, Your Worship. It's been moved by Councillor Gould, seconded by Her Worship. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. Carried. Thank you. Good morning. Kia ora korua. Good morning, Stavros. You're going to be talking to the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, members. We're here today to recommend that the committee agrees to receive and recommend for adoption to the full council our waste management and minimization plan. The reason why the council needs to adopt the plan is because it's a statutory requirement, we are required by law, by the Waste Minimization Act 2008, to have considered and adopted a waste management plan for our district. I will not go through in great detail. I will take the document as read. However, like any legislation, it's got carrots and sticks. One, the carrot is that by having a plan, we are complying with the general intent of the legislation. By doing so, we are entitled to have access to the National Waste Minimization Funds, that are administered by the Ministry of the Environment. The stick is that if we don't have an adopted waste minimization management and minimization plan, we are not entitled to access those national health minimization funds. In our case, that amounts to about $250,000 per year. The plan, of course, is not the beginning of anything. The plan that's in front of you is the end of a long process that started with this Council's consideration of the long-term plan. As you recall, most of you, and those of you who are not members of the Council at that point in time, there was a wide community consultation about options to improve our historical performance in waste management and minimization. In 2015-2016, there was, in conjunction with the long-term plan, a special consultative procedure was followed with regards to the draft waste strategy, and the Council, having received the feedback from that consultation, resolved to proceed ahead and implement a designated option in that consultation process. The important findings of that draft waste strategy, I will just go very briefly through them so we can remind us all where we are. We had a historical declining of the waste volumes to our landfill, roughly to about 50%. What really happened with that is that the revenue base was continuing to erode, while our cost base was increasing, with fixed costs and regulatory compliance increasing, and therefore the landfill became a non-viable and non-long-term sustainable financial activity, in addition to our environmental impacts of the activity. What the draft strategy and waste assessment identified is that nearly half of all the waste that was going into the CBAG system were comprised recyclable materials. In effect, we are throwing away into our landfill a lot more material than we had to do. The other findings of the draft waste strategy at that point in time is that when you consider the amount of waste generated by the average household and in general the district, there was a line of potential recyclable materials that could be recovered, and you see in that graph there, the blue line on the top identified about 7,000 tons of waste generated by the households were potentially recyclable materials. And yet, for a number of years, the achievement of recycling in the district stagnated to about 3,000 tons per year. So we are less than half of the potential recycling material that we could have removed from the waste stream. So in April this year, the Council received our recommendations following due process from procurement, and we have embarked a new methodology of collecting and managing waste and recyclables that was based on the provision of receptacles, and the pictures in front of you there. A large recyclable wheelie bin with 240 liters, a smaller bin for waste, and a smaller crate for glass recycling. And for those areas in the district that it is not feasible or operationally possible to be serviced by wheelie bins, we offered the option, especially around the lakes area and the rural areas, of using bags. The waste management and minimization plan that is in front of you is based on the preliminary and foundational principles of the Act, which requires us to take action to reduce the harmful effects of waste in our environment and improving the efficiency of the resource use. The new system, which this Council has agreed to implement and commenced gradually in phases since July, but it's been given full effect from 1 November this, last month, about 4 weeks ago, is showing some very encouraging and promising trends. And I outline in front of you just some of them, so you gain comfort that the decisions you have made about 12 months ago appear to be on the right track to achieve the objectives of the policy. For example, one of our targets was to increase the volumes of diverted materials, i.e. more recycling, from 3,000 tons to about 4,500 tons per annum. The current trends at the moment indicates that for this year, we'll be over 5,500 tons and possibly 6,000 tons, which means we more than double the amount of recyclables we remove from the waste stream. The other objective was to reduce the amount of household waste that has been taken to the landfill from about 8,500 tons to about 6,500 tons. Again, the early trends at this point in time indicate that we'll be heading towards 5,500 to 6,000 tons. And again, it's a significant betterment to the 25% we had as a target in the plan. We also, based on the public feedback we had in last year with the community consultation, where about 80% of the people requested access to convenient and curbside recycling collection, we set a target to achieve that 80% participation in our plan. The trends at the moment indicate that at least 90 to 95% of all households in the district are participating into the presentation of recyclables on curbside. Another key objective was to ensure that, in view of the declining revenue at the landfill and the increasing cost of our various collection systems, we embarked on a journey to ensure that we achieve sustainable long-term financial position for this activity. The previous system had a cost level of about $9.7 million per annum. The new system has got a cost level of about $6.9 million per annum. We do have a contract that is for 15 years, and there's a steady projection of those costs. So we do not anticipate any significant escalations to those costs. One of the main things that we managed to do through the new system is that we reduced a lot of our landfill liabilities. We no longer have to invest capital into the landfill. We can now reduce. We don't need to buy emission credits, which possibly saving us about $1 million a year. We will not be incurring trade waste, discharges and so on. And therefore, the new sustainable cost of $6.9 million is consistent with the vision you have embraced a year ago. Again, the transition process, we are 5 weeks into the transition process. It has not gone without any hiccups or problems. However, the trends you see in front of you, the bars indicate a steady improvement. We started in week 1 with about 700 to 800 calls a day. And we are now in week 5, and these calls have reduced to around about 100. We're not happy with that. Our goal is to achieve 0 calls or complaints. I think we were pragmatic enough to understand that in the course of contacting somewhere in the region of 6,000 collections each day from the households, having a rate of I suppose of problems around the 0.5% probably is not going to be is not pragmatic, not to expect them to take place. Nevertheless, in the process of executing the transition of the new service, we said from the beginning, and if you recall, I've said back in March when I made the presentation to you, if in the first 2-3 months we hit the 95% problem-free area, we'll be lucky, but we are at the moment operating at 98-99%, so we're doing better than than anticipated. Yes, there are problems, and yes, a lot of these problems are related to our mistakes, our faults, our information we give it to people. Our operator continues to make some mistakes, but we are only 5 weeks into the system, and I'm pretty comfortable, and my team is very comfortable that over the next couple of months, all these issues will be ironed out, and we'll achieve, if not 100%, but as close to 100% satisfaction and problem-free delivery as possible. I want to take this opportunity now to also to thank the team. I think the last few months have been extremely stressful and busy for the team. We have delivered in excess of 27,500 sets of bins and bags into the districts. For the first time, we've made an effort to align property information with the service information, and in that process we identified that our background systems were not 100% in that respect, and that created some confusion both amongst our staff and amongst the residents. But 5-6 weeks into the process, and I'm pleased to say that by the end of this week, every property that is charged a targeted levy is also aligned with our rating system, aligned with our property information system, and also found people who are receiving services but not paying rates at all. And when they call and they said we want bins, and we said, well, you're not paying rates, and they just sometimes they got a bit confused too. But nevertheless, that exercise gave us an insight as to some minor anomalies we had in our data information. And I think it's by the end of this week, that will be resolved out. So my colleagues here, Team Rose and Danny, have been and are working very hard to address these issues. We take the position that every time we get a complaint or a request for service, it doesn't matter what's the cause, it's our problem. We own that problem, and we need to lead it to management. As I said, it hasn't been trouble-free, and I don't anticipate to be trouble-free for a few more weeks yet. But nevertheless, the team has done a tremendous work, and I want to thank them, and I think they'll continue to do so. Now, at the financial level, the waste minimization and management plan requires us to outline the structure of funding plan for going forward activities. I just give you a very brief and summary outline. Our $6.9 million for the activity comprises the cost distributions you see up there. About $4.6 billion is contractual commitments. We've got a historical $900,000 funding in our historical investment, about $12.5 million of capital invested in the activity, especially the landfills, over the years, and that gives rise to depreciation. We've got some ongoing fees and charges for trade waste and for monitoring systems in our landfill for managing the concerns. We have, and also anticipate to spend about $100,000 a year into waste minimization and education programs around schools and communities. The targeted communities is a specific one which, we are suggesting that there are various parts of the community comprising residents association, marae, charitable organizations that do a fantastic community work, and although they don't pay rates, we should offer them the ability to for waste services, and recycling collections and so on, in order to encourage them to continue that community work. And we think that's a worthwhile cause, to continue to work with the community. The rest of the costs, comprise our own internal costs and our corporate overheads, makes us $6.9 million. Now, in terms of the funding leg of the equation, we receive, out of $6.9 million, somewhere in the region of, 10% of that comes from external sources, from fees and royalties and the MFE, and allows a residual core cost of about 90%. And the Waste Management and Minimization Act recommends and suggests that all the costs of the waste activity should be captured into a transparent way. And the recommendation of the plan is basically to capture the net costs into a targeted levy. However, we also recognize that as a council, you will have an opportunity through your draft annual plan to consider the net distribution, whether you want to load all the residual costs onto a targeted levy, or you want to recognize some general community benefit that may be a 10 or 15% or 20% that needs to be funded through general rates. However, for the purposes of this waste management plan, which is, it's got a 6-year life expectancy, the broad recommendation is that gradually at least you'll be moving towards to capture all the costs of the activity into the targeted levy, because it is transparent, it is accountable, and in the future, and I'll come later with that, there are improvement projects like organic waste and green waste collection and inorganic waste and e-waste. If you want to add services to that activity, lines of services, we can come back to you and say, well, that line of service will cost an additional X and translates into an additional Y level on the targeted levy, and everything is transparent and clear for everyone to see. Now, again, the waste minimum, the plan in front of you, it's got a 6-year life expectancy, and we are obligated under the legislation to review that at least every 6 years. We have captured in the current services the bulk of our activities, but going forward, we have outlined a number of improvement options. And going through that, obviously, historically we had not sufficient data with what's happening in terms of the waste activity, and that arises from private collections in other areas that are not under our control. We anticipate over the next, of the life of this plan, to make a more concerted and more targeted effort to capture more information and better data about what's happening in the waste generation, the waste diversion, who does what, and what is the general picture of the whole district, instead of predominantly what the council services tell us. The other thing we want to progress forward is to investigate the organic waste collection, and again that it's an option where material like food waste. If you look into our waste assessment last year, something that is about 39% it comprise what we call petrucibles. It's material that could be composted, can be diverted in other activities. But again, we have a lot of restaurants here. We've got a lot of green waste generation, which at the moment is not. We haven't got a system to collect it. We have a system at the landfill for green waste, but we have no curbside collection of green waste. Again, in the life of the plan, we propose to explore and build a business case of proceeding with that or not, and what the benefits and
Thank you, Stavros. I'd like to start moving into question time now. So.
And that I think that's the rest of them. It's in the document. You can follow through that, and we're ready for questions.
Thank you very much. This is a great piece of work, and we've all contributed to it over the last wee while as we've discussed our strategy. So thank you and your team for this piece of work. It has been, and also particularly the last 5 weeks, where you've certainly had to respond to all of those requests that were coming in. So thank you very much. There are a number of councillors that would like to speak. So Your Worship, and then I'll move through to the others as well.
Yes, firstly a comment. Thank you for answering the correspondence that's come through so quickly. And I see a lot of the concerns that come through my office, and I'm astonished at how quickly you've managed to put back a very detailed and reasonable answer to each question. My question to you is, and I need an assurance, and I think others do around here too, about these red plastic bags. We thought when we were filling paper bags that they were biodegradable when they went to the tip. Can you give us the assurance that about the plastic bags? Because that's the biggest feedback that I'm getting, is I hate plastic, get rid of it.
I think there are sort of, two lines, of response to that. One is that, the paper bag is biodegradable if you leave it out in the open air. If you do bury it into anaerobic conditions, it doesn't biodegrade, or if it biodegrades, it's going to take years and years to biodegrade, because simply it's not broken down by oxygen contact. So in effect, what we used to do in the past, we were buying 2.5 million bags a year at a cost of $1 million a year, and we buried in the landfill that, hoping that it will disappear. They don't disappear. The plastic bags, the residual plastic bags, I think the level of bags we have left over, we dropped from about 2.5 million bags a year to about maybe 50,000-60,000 bags a year. We were the last district that were buying paper bags from a manufacturer, and of course it's a different story. If you go and buy 2.5-3 million bags, they will produce it for you at $1 million cost a year. If you go and buy 50,000 packs, you will not be produced. It's not efficiencies of scale that be produced. So plastic bags, it presents for us perhaps not the ideal option, but in terms of the context of what we're doing at the moment, for 50,000 bags or 60,000 bags, the volume they present is a minuscule component of the overall waste that goes to the landfill. and actually it does not cause any leachate effect into anything. It just, it's inert into the landfill. At some point in the future, the technology might improve and convert the plastic bags into fully biodegradable components, but at the moment, what they call biodegradable plastic bags are really not, not in effect, biodegradable unless you leave them exposed to UV, and it's not really something that we would recommend.
Just another aspect of the waste minimisation bill was the fund set up to continue researching waste stream options. Is it worth us looking at partnering with an institute like Scion to see if we could use, it's not the paper, but use the wood waste to develop some sort of longer term biodegradable product, such as they're doing with food containers now and products like that? I think that would make a lot of us feel really happy, and we've got Scion here, and we could apply to the Waste Minimisation Fund for some sort of research to be done into finding a better option.
Again, the purpose of having waste management and minimization plan would identify future improvement options. This is not something that cannot be inserted into that improvement option investigation options, and we'll report back to you in the context of that investigation.
Thank you. Questions at this point? Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a couple of questions, but I think you've answered one of them. Just under trends, one was to do with the incidence of fly tipping. Has there been any trend in the incidence of fly tipping observed at this early point in time? Because I'm getting queries about, certainly about e-waste and the costs associated with it, and I'm wondering whether, we're getting more incidences of that, and I see Tim's poised with an answer. Can I ask another question after that?
Certainly.
It's been quite hard to understand whether there's been any increase or decrease in fly tipping, because our contractors, Smart Environmental, have taken a different methodology of being able to report it. So we have got more thorough data than we ever had previously when Cas Corpora operated in the system. So it's really hard to understand that in itself. There seems to be an increase in the amount of green waste being illegally dumped, which then may support the ability to go to organic collection in the future. In regards to e-waste, we haven't noticed a great increase in the amount of e-waste being disposed of illegally by dumps. It's been more and more difficult to dispose of fridge freezers from us as a council's point of view. We will now have to pay scrap metal merchants even more money to take the e-waste away from us, especially the fridge freezers. So not only is it the $15 per item to degas it, they will also have to pay the company more money to actually remove that item as well, just because the scrap metal price has hit a rock bottom price and it's not going to go up in the next few years by the looks of it.
I add something to that too, is that, as Tim said, we don't have the evidence yet to show a clear trend. What I would say is that, a few months ago, the average household was given a targeted levy funded capacity to dispose their wastes at the tune of 60 litres per household per week. At the moment, each household got a capacity of 420 litres per week. That's a significant, 7 times, sevenfold increasing capacity to dispose your waste and your recyclables. Now, are they persistent offenders? Probably there are. And we need to continue to analyze the problem and target it more effectively. The green waste, as Tim said, is a significant source of, of problem. But I think we need to sort of target it and see what we have alternatives to deal with it.
Thank you. Councillor Gould, then Councillor Sturt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Stavros, for your report. My question is, when you quote explore green waste, when are the ratepayers of Rotorua going to have the opportunity of paying extra for a green waste bin? Because a lot of the rubbish being collected in the ordinary rubbish bin is actually green waste. And to me, you're actually filling up the truck a lot quicker on stuff which could have been composted and used elsewhere?
Well, I think our intention is, with the LTP next year, we need to have in front of you some options for that. And again, one of the things that it's a bit early for us to give you some definitive answers to is that we have not done we did not have an opportunity to do a detailed assessment of the waste that goes to the waste bins at the moment, to understand what portion of it is green waste. That is subjective observations. We think that some green waste goes to the waste bin, but we don't actually know how much of that's going. Now the landfill at the moment receives what, 9,000 tons green waste? Yeah. So our landfill receives about 9,000 tons of green waste as diverted. It's not landfill, it's composted, but presumably you can add to it by offering a curbside collection of green waste. I know personally I've got an arrangement with a commercial contractor who collects my green waste every 2 weeks. It costs me, as much as it costs me no more than targeted rate for my other waste. So, but it's a decision I make, and maybe eventually you can get efficiencies of scale and offer green waste curbside collection at half the cost of what the market provides at the moment.
Thank you. There's still a couple of questions. Councillor Stewart.
I want to go into the actual doings of the waste stream, because like many of us here, I'm into improving the efficiency of resource use. But in terms of this report here, I think it needs to be a bit more comprehensive in terms of saying when we're going to address inorganic collections, when we're going to address the banning of plastic shopping bags, when we're going to address the issue of exactly what Councillor Gall just raised. That is the biggest question I've had. Why can't you open it up for a contractor to provide a green waste bin with a green lid, door to door, and open it up for another contractor or the existing contractor to provide that service? Because I won't comment about the dumping, I'll do that in the debate on the dumping.
Is that your question then, is it,
yeah.
Councillor?
The question is, why is this report not comprehensive enough to actively support? I mean, I think 218 is too late. I think we need a comprehensive plan on introducing all of these things into the waste stream. Because when I took all my bins down to the Tenai Road recycling centre, I could recycle everything. I can't now. All our meat trays, all our plastics from our meat trays, all go in the general rubbish. I was recycling before, but that now is going to, I think, is going to landfill. I'm not sure. The other issue, Madam Chair, and it's not addressed in this report, is the issue with the bins in terms of the tenants and landlords opting out. Where's that rubbish going? That's another thing that's not even covered here. And there was one other thing. I've always wondered where all the lawn clippings go from the lawn mowing contractors. Where does that disappear? Does that go to green waste providers, or does that end up like you drive around the district, you see it on riverbanks, you see them in parks and reserves, you see them across the road in Pukengi Road, you see them all around the place, piles and piles of green clippings. That's not sustainable either. So I was hoping this waste management and minimisation plan would be a lot more comprehensive. You've already said you'll bring back a report next year. Well, I thought a requirement was, for example, partnering for car bodies, partnering for metal waste, etc., etc. I could go on and on, but perhaps I wonder why this wasn't comprehensive enough.
Perhaps we could get some answers there. If thank you, Stavros.
Two things. Obviously, the number line of inquiries there from Councillor Stewart. First of all, this is a waste minimization, management and minimization plan that needs to be satisfying the requirements of the Waste Management Act. What you are saying is that for this district, because all the things you have said, they're outlining to the improvement program there. This is a decision you will make as a body, as an executive, as a governance body of the district, as to how fast you are to bring these, these activities. the report signals that we will be working on these issues. If you want to bring it earlier, more than happy for us to bring it there. But it's not a position of this plan to make decisions on your behalf as a governing body as to when you want to introduce a new service into your activities. All this plan is saying that we will explore these lines of additional activities, and the council, through its annual plan and long-term plan, will decide the timing and the cost associated with each of these activities. So we need to be quite important to be very clear as to the distinction between this plan and your role as a governance body for this district, or when and how you want to pay for your activity. We signal these things in the plan here, and then we'll be in a dialogue with you to identify when and how it's going to be implemented. Again, there are issues like, as I said earlier, some of the lawn mowing companies, our landfill receives about 9,000 tons a year of that green waste. There are other composting companies and others receive that green waste too. And yes, there are people who have been irresponsible at dumping it in a legal way. So we need to continue to work on these issues. As I said, we have improvements to be made, but certainly they can be achieved.
Jeff, you would like to add something?
Sorry, through the chair. Just one of the comments that I think Councillor Sturt raised there used the term "open it up to other contractors." I just want to be very clear at the moment. There is nothing stopping an individual ratepayer, as Stavros has indicated, approaching one of the waste management companies to supply a green waste service. So we're not in any way controlling or prohibiting contractors actually working with individual ratepayers to provide a collection service that they want to, above what it is that council is providing. So I think that's an important aspect, that if people want a green waste service, that is available through the private sector. Can I just finish? The question is when do we actually, if we move to a total collection green waste system, obviously that won't be able to be provided within the current rating system that we have at the moment, and we would have to look at actually amending that in order to actually extend that collection. So what the team's doing is that they are taking this stage by stage and saying the first and most important aspect was to actually deal with our main waste stream with regards to particularly the recyclable component of that, and that's what the team is actually focused on in this waste minimisation strategy. But then in addition to that, they will move over time, over the next period, and Stavros has given you the timing for that, to look at additional waste services that you may wish to be provided across the district, but they want to actually make sure that we've locked down and understand both the demand side and the cost of actually providing additional services across the district in general.
Madam Chair, if I just make counter comment that I think you might have misunderstood what I was looking for as a comprehensive curbside service, and because we had representations, as you recall, when we were going through this process, Stavros, from Carter Holt Harvey, who said to us they would take every piece of cardboard that we could produce or paper. Now what we've got is we've got that in the recycling bin mixed in with everything else, and yet when I used to go down to Tino Road, there was separate paper, there was separate plastic bottles, there were separate tins, there were separate aerosol
Yes, Councillor
cans,
Stewart, I'm happy to hear your comments when we open it up.
I'm happy with the answer, but it's what the ratepayers are asking for is the curbside service. Part of the council, they still see this, even though it's a private contract, they still see it as a very responsible way of handling the waste stream promoted by the council.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt, then Councillor Bentley.
I think if everyone turned to page 27 and 28, all of those issues that have been raised are spelt out there quite clearly with the time frames of investigating the organic waste, the diversion of polystyrene, the hazardous wastes, and whether we'll need a targeted levy. So all of that is in the future improvement plans, because we understood that we couldn't roll it out together.
Yes.
And I think for me that clarifies exactly when those conversations can be had. If we choose as a council to have those conversations sooner, then that's up to us. But it's quite clearly articulated for everyone in the community that we will be having those discussions, and that they are in depth, as well as the Sustainable Communities program, which is looking at that starting next year, and that is for those people with community gardens, whether there's possibilities for composting in those areas. So I think that that's actually been covered extremely well, as well as the possibility of a national e-waste day. And I'd just like to make a comment that I think it's a very thorough report. I'm delighted with the progress so far that's come through, and I think that well done to our community, actually, for supporting the new rollout and for solving all those issues as they come in.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Yes, we have had many discussions on the preparation of this report. Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Stavros, for your team for the information they've come up with. With regard to the green waste, I can't wait for you to investigate that further and get it going, because I too have a private contractor and he is very inefficient. And I think that once we get it into that sort of system, you'll find that your rubbish bulk will reduce significantly, because people won't be doing things like putting lawn clippings and twigs and so forth into the general rubbish. Thank
you. Yes, Mr. Berryman-Camp.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Stavros, I have two questions. Number one, when I go through the report, and I'm generally supportive of the report and generally supportive of the approach, but I guess one of the things that stood out to me is I felt a bit of a disconnect in terms of turning some of the rhetoric into operational speak. So my question is, for instance, if you go to the waste minimisation plan, in the foreword by Her Worship the Mayor, it's quite clear that one of the key things is sustaining the modi of our people. But when I go through the plan and when I go through the information, there's very little from a cultural perspective regarding this plan. And for me, that's a lost opportunity, as well as more work that is required. So my question is, well, two questions. I'll say them both and give you the opportunity to answer. Number one, how do we transfer the rhetoric into the operation? Because when I've gone through the information, we're talking about that. But again, the social and cultural issue component is a generic one that could be from fielding. And the only part within the action plan I see that mentions kaitiakitanga is an education program within schools, and the council is not responsible for the curriculum. So question one, in terms of being true to our guiding principles, which are also in there, that mention the Māori mention cultural considerations in terms of the treatment of waste. How is that going to transfer into the operational component? My second question is, how does this fit into the wider strategic picture? Because when I look at it, we've all been attending workshops on the Rotorua way, on strategically where we want Rotorua to be in 2030, but there's very little I see within this that outlines to me how does this contribute to that. Now, for instance, within the work streams, within the workshops, we were talking about the importance of culture, the importance of water. This feels to me very much to be a plan to meet MFE's funding requirements, as opposed to a strategic opportunity for this council to position itself as a leader in the treatment of waste management economically, environmentally and culturally. And I can't help but link back to our work on the wastewater treatment centre, where if we can nail the cultural treatment of our wastewater, we'll be leading globally. And of course we've got the current issues in terms of the pipeline and Standing Rock. to show that there's increased global interest in local bodies acting in a culturally appropriate way. So, two big long questions. I'm happy to go through them again, but the first one is rhetoric to operational. Second one, how does this fit strategically with the other components that we're trying to achieve?
I'll just, I'll try to be as, as succinct as possible, I suppose. But, I mean, in terms of our one of the two primary considerations of the Waste Minimization Act is the requirement of territorial local authorities, to minimize the adverse effect of waste generation and management to the environment. I see that, and we see that, as very closely linked and aligned with the cultural aspirations of iwi about that. And I give you a quick example of that is that we do have a landfill that used to receive an X volume of waste. That landfill was receiving both, it was generating emissions to the air and emissions to the land and emissions, discharges to the water too. So the actions we are taking, we have been taken as part and parcel of that waste, of this waste plan, is actually to start clawing back these adverse impacts, from the landfill by capping it, sealing it, establishing a transfer station, and thinking about developing in the future in a way that will minimize, or if not eliminate, the emissions to air, emissions to the land, and emissions to the water. The Puringa stream, for example, we know there is some contamination of the landfill. By actually capping and sealing the landfill, we reduce by 75% the trade waste and leachate, that potentially can escape into the stream.
So, and through you, Madam Chair, so, yep, get that, that's all cool. Yep. My point is, that's all cool, sorry, thank you for your answer. My point is, if you have a look at page 10 of the plan, I think it's fantastic that we've reduced the waste by 25% going into the landfill. When I see that, I see we've reduced the degradation of Papatuanuku by 25%. That's a major achievement if you look at it from a cultural performance perspective. What we've received in the report today is the financial and also we have picked up the environmental impacts of our recycling program, which is great. What I'm saying is that if we need to be true to the rhetoric in the guiding principles, we also need to have documented, and here is the cultural impact of these activities. So I absolutely talk what you're saying, it's the great thing. My point is we're not looking at this wide enough.
Okay. Thank you. And I think there'd be some of us around the table that would agree with you on that. So there is some work that needs to be done at some stage in the future. Mrs. Trumper, and then Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Stavros, I'm just wanting to have some clarification about the transfer stations. Currently in here there is a proposal.
I just can't hear, so it might just be me.
Can you not hear me?
Thank you.
Sorry.
Just pull it closer to you.
So what I'm wanting is some clarification around the transfer stations and their future, and also the other cost is approximately itemised here as 415. Can you tell me how your costs are measured to operate the transfer stations?
Tim can talk a little about transfer stations. I'm not entirely sure what you mean about the future transfer stations. At the moment, what we have, and we don't anticipate that to change, is that we do have areas of the district that are best served by a transfer station simply because of the distance to the collection service or distance to other facilities. And therefore, for those, especially rural communities or lakes communities, a transfer station is a convenient interim step. And we anticipate that they will continue to be in operation and refined. So again, going back into some of the rural areas like Rotorua-Tait and Kuru Valley, which, as you are aware, we are exploring, whether the community want them. There will be, a discussion with the community as part of parcel of our draft union plan as to if they want the service, what is the best methodology to receive that service. It might be based on collections, from some areas. Some areas might be a case of consolidation points, and some cases might have another transfer station. I'm not sure. We have to go through that. We have to have this dialogue. But the existing transfer stations in Tarawera, Kiri Falls, Mamaku, Rotorua, they will continue to operate, and they will continue to work with the community to refine them as time goes by. Is that?
It's just that on page 46, closing was an option, and I just wanted to clarify whether that was actually a proposal or just an option that you are investigating.
You are reading the draft waste strategy,
Okay. Yes.
which it was consulted back in 2015.
Okay.
That's a document that went out to the community to say these are all the issues and potential. These are options, but we move away from there. And the document is embedded in the document in this document to show there was a trail of community engagement. That question was placed and been answered, and the answer is no. We continue to work on the transfer stations and improve them.
This is where the miscommunication has occurred, is that this document, obviously communication from one party to another party, has not been clear and concise, because I know there was concern about Rotorua transfer station being closed, and there were residents concerned as to what their options were. But that's been clarified, so thank you very kindly for that. The other question I have, sorry, Madam Chair, I've got one more, is the survey of 1,300 residents regarding what their options were wanting, and the results were 50-50. I read in here there are actually 2,250 homes without a current service. Was the survey only identifying those 1,300 homes, and where were they identified from?
The rural areas, the 1,300 properties, thereabouts. I would be lying if I knew exactly 1,314 or whatever it is, but there are 1,300 properties. But what we have found out as part and parcel of aligning the service with the rateable properties, we found there's a number of other properties that were not part of the serviceable areas in the past, and they were all distributed all over the district. So we've been communicating with these people too to say, will you be now in the serviceable areas, and the options are available for you to join in, and we'll be recommending in the draft union plan next year that the historical option of people opt out to be removed from that, but it's something for the council to consider, because this scheme relies heavily on the efficiencies of scale. If you have people opting out, it means it erodes and dilutes the benefit of having large numbers, a large level of servicing, and therefore getting the most cost-effective process. So the 1,300 properties you have in mind is of those two rural areas, but there are a number of other properties distributed all around the district and to be honest, for some quite ambiguous historical reasons that don't seem to be being part of the service, and we're making right now an effort to find out why they are not and what are the future options for them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, regarding some of the cultural aspects of waste minimisation, I think you wanted to make a comment, Monty, our cultural advisor. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just in response to the question and adding additional information to what Stavros is doing, I've been working with Rose and Stavros' team on a nationally recognised program called Parakuri, which is a direct waste minimisation program intervening into marae strategies. We, via Rose, have here at Rotorua Lakes Council become a member of that. That's allowed us to access some funding to develop and further roll out the strategy to the marae and to the Te Aroa marae. We have taken the opportunity for the past 12 months also to introduce this program to marae, as we have been visiting and talking to them about the rollout of what's happening now in terms of the program and other consultations and communications that we've been having with them. Another one has been as part of the signage and the development of signage in and around our community. We have, again, I've been working with Stavros' team to provide Maori signage and so on as part of the general signage that we've been doing.
May I just ask then, in regards to what you're proposing, or some of those actions for the marae, would some of those be applicable to the wider community as well?
Yes.
Because that, I think, would be desirable, highly desirable. Thank you. Thank you. There's a few other questions I'd like to take, and then we'll come back. Thank you. Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a couple of relatively short practical questions on the implementation of the strategy. Firstly, I've noticed that the trucks that are actually doing the waste collection out my way, the general waste truck, the guy is getting out of the truck, grabbing the bin, walking behind the vehicle with the bin and lifting it onto a rear lifting loading apparatus, and is actually spending longer in the roadway than the guys were with the paper bag quick dump into the hopper on the back of the truck. And I thought one of the objectives that we were heading for was an improvement in health and safety aspect of people doing this job. Perhaps you could ask that one first.
So what our contractors are doing to try and balance out the amount of properties, especially in the lakes areas, they are using a rear loader to be able to assist the other trucks in that area on that day. And that is the only truck that they are using to actually service from the rear of the truck. Everything else is on the side. We will be looking to phase that out as well, especially at the outcome of the annual plan. If the rural community around the Nakuru, Waikili Valley do come on board with the solutions going forward, then we can look at more trucks, which then may be able to remove that truck from that system.
Thank you. My second question is with regard to disposal of green waste. I've been disposing of my green waste at the Tinai transfer station, and since the implementation of this strategy, the cost of me getting rid of my ute load of green waste has gone from $15 to $25. And when I ask why, the answer I'm given is because the tip fees have gone up, operated by the same company. Did we not put any protection for ratepayers to hiking of charges when we went with one supplier?
Well, I think the Tinai transfer station, belongs to waste management, and obviously they are free to adjust, their services as they see, appropriate for their custom. What you find in our landfill, we have a protection for our domestic household, waste, for which we're getting a 25% discount as a council for our domestic, for our domestic waste we generate. The landfill fee adjustments were made, to some degree to accommodate the actually now lower tip fees for small quantities of waste. For example, it used to be $15, for a car boot, carload. Now it's $10. The trailer load was $35, I think, Tim. Yes, under $25. And the green waste, I'm pretty sure it's still about $48 per ton, which compared to the $128 for the general waste. So the green waste is only charged roughly about 1/3 of the general waste. So I'm not entirely sure what was the justification they gave to you for it, but it's the green waste still receives at the landfill a charge that is 1/3 of the general waste.
I think also I'd like to clarify on this. Historically, the cost of green waste going to the landfill to be recycled has been about $15 per tonne. The council was paying the contractor to do that at approximately about $40 per tonne. So the fees of the green waste going to the landfill was subsidised by about $250,000 by council for the last several years, which is why now council has removed the subsidisation of that by the $240,000. That's why the cost per tonne of green waste has gone from $15 to $40 a tonne at the landfill, is to cover the true cost of that processing.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson, then Mr. Thomas. Oh, your question's asked. Thank you very much. Mr. Thomas?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of questions. Firstly, around the implementation, I know that a lot of the difficulties have occurred around the lakeside communities, and looking forward to those all being sorted out as they slowly are. I was really impressed with the statistics around the buy-in to recycling, that you're getting 90 to 95% is a real feather in the cap for our community, I think. My question around that is that we currently out in the lakeside communities, especially where we have people who, for one reason or another, are needing to use the bag collection rather than the wheelie bin collection. Can we revisit looking at some sort of strategy to enable them to recycle as well? A lot of those people are out-of-town ratepayers. They've lived with recycling in Auckland and Hamilton and Tauranga and wherever else they live. They've been recycling for years, and they are all very keen to recycle. So I'm hoping we can address that. The second point would be on the public reserves, the bins in the public reserves around our other lakes other than Rotorua. I noticed yesterday on our bus tour that we have recycling in the public reserves down at the lakefront there, but we don't have it around our other lakes. And I'm kind of puzzled why we think that people visiting one lakeside reserve will recycle and people visiting other lakeside reserves won't. So I wonder if we can address that issue as well.
The first question, I suppose, is that the answer is that the lakes communities have got access to transfer stations who can take their recyclables at this point in time. So if a person who's out of town and they want to sort of, they want to recycle, they've got, transfer stations where recyclables can be dropped at any time on a 24/7 basis. Having said that, obviously, it's not out of the question to continue to work with the lakes communities to say, what is the next phase of that. The issue of recycling bins in the reserves, I don't know if you recall, but back in I think in March this year, when we explained the rolling out of the new contracts, we said the litter bins would be phased in over a period of 2 years, with the first tranche happening by the end of November this year and early December. But obviously the program has got another 18 months to continue to be implemented. So what you see today, that is not the final product. You see the first phase of a long process, to gradually upgrade, the bins in the reserves and beaches and lakefronts and so on. Unfortunately, you cannot do everything in one go, but certainly we'll be working to gradually upgrade all these bins over the next period of the next 18 months.
Thank you.
Could I just ask a supplementary on that? Stavros, and I'm aware that we'll be discussing this issue again next week at the first community board meeting. But in terms of access to recycling centres, some communities have that. For other areas around the lake, it can be a 60-kilometre round trip to a recycling centre. I just also had a question, since people have been talking about green waste. We would love to see green waste collection at our transfer stations. It would work really well for our communities, and people would travel that distance rather than needing curbside green waste collection. So hopefully that might be something we can implement in the future.
Yeah, I think it's great to hear that, because at the end of the day, the cost structure of the activities, as I said earlier, is recommended to be funded predominantly by targeted levy. And if you, as elected members and community representatives, want to add services to that, we're very easy for us to put together a package of our business case for you. We say we can have that. It's a menu of services, and the cost effect on the targeted levy is going to be X, Y, Z. So the system we propose gives you the mechanism to actually explore what additional services you wish to see implemented and at what cost, and then you can consult with the community and test the desire to fund this kind of services. That'd be great.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Stavros. And also, thank you for a very, very thorough report. And some of my questions have already been asked and answered, but can you help me get my head around the one that talks about the less revenue from the Atiamuri landfill and that because much is going out of our region to other places. Now I thought that could be a positive. That means, would it mean our landfill can last us longer and we're having to spend less on trying to provide there? But then I see you're also kind of wrestling with the fact that South Waikato might change soon and Wakatane, so I know we don't take anything from out of town. Does that come into the equation?
Well, I mean, our Tiamuri landfill has been seeing a degradation of the volumes of waste are reaching it, and as a result of that, we've got a fixed cost and operation cost going north and even going south, creating a deficit, a gap between the two of them. Now, historically, you had in your bylaw a desire to avoid waste from out of the region to come into the landfill. Into our landfill. The bylaw has changed in August this year, and we are able to do that now. But one of the things we need to be doing, and we will be coming back to this council over the next 18 months, hopefully, with a long-term plan for the landfill. One of the things to try to do is actually to arrest the environmental and cultural impacts of that landfill by bringing it to a particular level, sealing it and capping it to stop air and land and water emissions, because we do have a legacy problem with those areas. We need to seal it and then plan the next 30 or 50 years ahead, and at that point in time we need to pursue waste migration into the landfill that could be sustainable environmentally and financially. But we'll come back to you with a proposal over the next 18 months, hopefully, with that.
Thank you. And Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much, Stavros, for you and your team, for a very good detailed report about the way we are going forward to 2022. I also support recommendation 3, both 1 and 2. So thank you.
Would you like to actually move that?
Yes, I would, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I am going to call a halt soon, but I would like to perhaps lay this to rest, but we are open for any discussion at this point in time. Oh, you're seconding. Thank you very much. Oh, you'd like a question? Thank you, Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, I wondered if the team in surveying the practices that have become apparent through your investigation and developing this waste strategy. I agree with my colleagues. This is very comprehensive. It does. I can read. I know that it shows a way ahead in how we're going to address some of the issues that our community have been highlighting to us in the last 6 or 8 weeks since the service was created. However, there is the indiscriminate dumping as a main issue. I've got on my Facebook page, and any of you can have a look, a young lady who took a trailer load to the landfill, and it cost her $62 to take a trailer to the landfill. You talk about a boot. Does she take 6 boot loads so it doesn't cost her anything? And also the big bin, $750 to a 9-metre skip. Now, we as ratepayers who use these private services, of course, whilst we're saving on stuff going to the landfill, are not paying through the nose, but we're having to pay to get rid of our normal rubbish, and this is an issue. So I just wondered, Stavros, if in the team, I see you're spending $100,000 on, if you go back to the budget that you had up there, the one, if we could please. There was $100K and you spent $300K on a waste solutions team. I wonder whether there's an opportunity to become more proactive and have a rubbish sheriff in this district. One that is involved in the education through the schools and through signage, etc. Enforcement, but also to track the illegal dumping, because it is rampant. I have rung this council every day in the last 2 weeks about indiscriminate dumping. I haven't asked the question about green waste, because you've answered that. People are just dumping section loads of stuff. Danzy Road, top of Dalbeth Road, Kaharoa, Mountain Road, etc., etc. So whilst I can read, Karen Hunt, that we're going to address those issues, what I'm saying is these are issues that we are facing now in the waste stream. And culturally, environmentally, it's not acceptable that house lots where they now have to pay $700 for a skip is now ending up at a lay-by out on the Hamarana Road, and that's not good enough. What I'm asking, Madam Chair, is have you considered the possibility, and within that budget, because there's 400,000 in there, minimisation education and 300,000 for waste solutions team, whether we could get a rubbish sheriff to, one, go through the schools and do the education, the enforcement that it is illegal, and also to follow these vehicles that are heading north with trailer loads of rubbish, and you know they're not going to the landfill.
I don't think...
And I've got to follow them.
Thank you, Councillor.
To find out who they are. So the question needs to be answered.
Thank you. I don't think that that's a question that you can really answer. That's about people's behaviour. I think it's there are some issues that are going to come back through the report that you're going to present from time to time to us. But I think at this point in time, I don't believe you're in a position to answer some of those questions, Stavros.
May I just a quick one? I mean, I like the term rubbish sheriff, but then, our contract with Smart Environmental anticipates and expects that Smart Environmental will do an investigation on fly tipping and identify people, identify the sources of it to enable us to prosecute. However, it's also equally fair to say that it's a fine for $300, and you perhaps spend up to $10,000 investigating and prosecuting something. So the legislation at this point in time is not in our favor, but I totally agree with you. We just have to continue to utilize the means we've got in place, to manage it.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Donaldson, and then thank you.
Yeah,
then I'm going
just
to...
by way of supporting the recommendation, Madam Chair, I would like to acknowledge the work of Stavros and his team, who have tried hard to get this right, this implementation right. I fully support that we recommend to Council to adopt the plan and the strategy. And I would just make one plea in terms of education, and that is we've got a wave of tourists coming this summer, and we've already experienced it on a couple of fine weekends, and Stavros has been very helpful, in particular with Lake Okaraka, but there'll be other close areas of lakeside reserves, is that we perhaps instead of all, and I know signage is a bit of a poison chalice, but we just have a sign on the way to the lakes, and it could be just before Rotorua Marae and also on the way to Okaraka and Tikitapu, etc. Just please respect our environment and take your waste home, because we've got the dock camp there at Okaraka where they have a pack in, pack out, and they direct people to plonk their waste at Boys Beach, and that's part of the problem of Boys Beach getting these big volumes. So I think if a lot of our locals took their picnic with them and brought the waste back, it would help a great deal, but I fully support.
Thank you very much, Councillor Donaldson. Thank you, Stavros. Thank you for answering all the many questions that were put, and for the discussion, councillors, that we've had on this topic today. It has been moved by Councillor Kumar and seconded by Councillor Sturt that the committee recommends to Council to adopt the Waste Management and Minimisation Plan Rotorua Waste Strategy 2016 to 2022. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you. Carried. Thank you. I am going to call for ask for a little, perhaps a break of 5 to 6 minutes, please, or in time to allow you to check your phones and get a cup of tea. Thank you. Thank you, councillors. Well, thank you, councillors, and I'm pleased we had that short break. Recommendation 3. Thank you, that the report Sister Cities and International Relations be received. It's been moved by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Maxwell. All those in favour that the report be received, please say aye. Thank you. Carried. Thank you, John Paul. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, this report just seeks to tidy up 3 interrelated policies that haven't really been touched too much over the last term of council. You can see I've made a reference to one of them which hasn't been updated for 10 years. Now, Councillor, what's being proposed in this report is a move away from a prescribed relationships to a business case approach. So in that case, it's moving away for stipulating how many times we should visit sister cities in a particular term to saying, look, we'll only respond to those who have initiated or continue to have contacts with us. So certainly moving to that sort of business case approach. The only deviation from what I've just described, which is a business case approach, is the attendance at the Local Government New Zealand conference, and that really just picks up on the decisions that were made for the last conference and the inclusion of a Te Tato board member to go in that delegation to the Local Government conference. So councillors, the other key bit is about 5 years ago we removed a dedicated resource or a part-time resource that supported the sister city relations, and Her Worship has been fairly generous in giving us the leeway, because we haven't been particularly efficient in how we've managed some of those, because it's been picked up between the main offices of the Mayor, the governance team, as well as DR. So at times there has been a slight level of confusion between who's responsible for what. So what this report seeks to do is really to clarify we don't want to add back any dedicated resourcing. But what we have tried to do in this report is make sure we're quite clear about the processes and who will be involved and how to support decision making. And certainly with the business case approach, we want to make sure that the transparency around visits and delegations and the purposes and benefits are seen by you as an elected body, and for you to sign off those relationships. So happy to answer off any questions. Through you, Madam Chair, there's one other small adjustment, an editorial change to one of the policies. Should I just mention that before we go any further?
Yes, please.
So, councillors, if you just turn to page 32, the second paragraph under the heading policy, so we're under the Sister City Relationships policy. We had actually changed a couple of words in there, but we've actually got the wrong version here, so it's just got quite a harsh sound to it. So what it should say in the second paragraph is, rather than the words null and void, it should be inactive. So if I just read that sentence to you, Council has seen a decline in active contact with the majority of its sister cities. As part of the 2016 review, all relationships are considered inactive unless contact is initiated and sustained by sister cities, and when that contact is considered beneficial to Council. So again, it's putting it in more of a positive frame and reflects also what those other cities are having in the way of contact with us. So that's just a small editorial change to the policy. So happy to answer off any questions.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, JP. I'm pleased to see this paper on our agenda today, because I think we'll have some views on particularly the sister cities relationship there. Your Worship, would you like to?
Just a question there. I agree with you about the policy on page 32, where you've stipulated that the 4 that we've got relationships with. I just wonder if it's time to really face and look at the Lake Macquarie. In the 3 years, there's been one councillor that visited from Lake Macquarie who popped into my office. but there is no active, and we're almost pretending that there is. And I think with the way that you've framed this paper, which is welcomed, I might add, we say that it should lead to some economic development opportunity for the city. And we'd always see someone from Lake Macquarie, but really we've lost all those historical ties with those that set up the agreement. We just jump over the ditch all the time. It just seems a very strange fit, and it might be right that I agree, inactive, but perhaps it's time to drop it, and I don't believe it would cause any offence. So that's something that other councillors wouldn't be aware of. There is absolutely no activity at all.
I think we did, when we were going through this for the agenda item, Your Worship, we did actually bring that up and think that it might actually over time take care of itself by just being absolutely phased out, which seems to be the case at this point. Thank you. Councillor Maxwell. Yes, it's questions at this point. It won't be too long, we'll get into. Thank you. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, JP, conference attendance for elected members. Am I right in understanding that community boards have their own annual conference, and where is the policy on attendance at those? Thanks.
Through you, Madam Chair. I think the approach we took here was to put it in the same category as all other conference attendance. So yes, they have historically attended those, and I would expect that the topics that would be considered at the community boards conference would be of relevance to our current community boards. So again, it would be putting them in the same league as any other attendance. So a business case would look at the topics on that conference, put it forward, and I would probably expect that you would see the value in sending representatives to those conferences.
Supplementary, Madam Chair, is that something that would come to council, or is that something that could be delegated to community boards to decide that? Because I think that's a wee bit of personally a bit of a slap.
Look, it could very much so, and I think it's the key there is to just check the relevance and the relevance to the individuals involved. So maybe that's a good approach going forward. They should know what their business is and the relevance to their business.
And that should certainly be something I think that could be delegated to them. We did say they're going to have some wider, I was going to say powers, but you know what I'm talking about. Yes, Councillor Donaldson.
So, Madam Chair, could that perhaps be a fourth bullet point, point 2, that attendance by elected members of community boards at their national conference be delegated to them, or something along those lines?
Something along those lines. Yes, I think that's a good idea. Thank you. Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My first question is why we actually need 3 separate policies and don't just have one sort of travel and expenses policy that actually covers these scenarios, because, for example, if you look at page 32, the bottom half of it is exactly the same as the bottom half of page 33. So I would have thought it would have been relatively simple to actually roll those just into one simpler policy that we could all follow. And secondly, I'm not at all happy with the statement right at the bottom of pages 32 and 33 that travel by elected representatives undertaken at the request of Rotorua Economic Development is excluded from this policy. Sorry, they are a council-controlled organisation. The policy should include travel by representatives even if they want them to go, not they make the decision. Thank you.
Would you like to comment on? Thank you. Yes, certainly, Your Worship.
I wouldn't support that. That is one of the fundamental roles of Destination Rotorua, and I don't want to know about their travel as long as it's within the budget that the CEO has to manage. And that they are achieving the outcomes that we expect against our SOI. So, and none of us go on, no elected members go on a Destination Rotorua work at all.
Madam Chair, if I can respond to that, that's not what the policy says here. The policy here says the policy does not include travel by elected representatives undertaken at the request of and paid for by other international, national or local organisations, including Rotorua Economic Development. This is all about elected representatives' travel and expenditure. What this policy is saying, and the way it is currently formulated, is that Rotorua Economic Development can override this council's policy on elected representatives travelling internationally or anywhere else.
Make that clear.
So I think the words including Rotorua Economic Development should be deleted from both policies.
Through Madam Chair, just the Chief Executive might want to join me in just answering off this question. Her Worship started by saying that we have a board who oversees the delivery of that function on our behalf against our statement of intent and on a basis of funding. So they may be entering into travel arrangements to promote the district or promote investment in economic development. We really had left that board as a governing board to decide if they felt it was appropriate to invite, because of the Mayor's status, for example, to also go with a delegation to a particular city or a particular place to support that. So, but they would be very clear in making that decision, because they would be incurring the cost from their total budget and approving it through their governance as to why they would want that attendance of an elected member. So we had not wanted to cut across their governance decision making against how they performed their SOI. So that was why we had treated this as an exclusion. So I don't know if the Chief Executive wants to add to that.
Thank you. That's a good explanation.
No, I think JP's largely covered that off, and but just through the chair, I think it's worthwhile just noting that the CCO actually has got an active role in promoting Rotorua on an international scale, both from an events perspective, but also from an economic development aspect as well. What they do from time to time is actually ask the Mayor and also our cultural ambassador to actually accompany them where that's appropriate, and particularly when you're dealing with countries such as China. The role of the Mayor and also the cultural ambassador is actually seen as actually quite significant in actually adding a level of persuasion to the case that they're making. But at the end of the day, that would be, and I believe should be, the role of the CCO to actually manage their business, and it would be their decision as to actually issuing invites if they believe that there was actually the case to do so.
Thank you. Councillor Gould, then Ms Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your report, JP. My question relates to page 34. When you attend conferences out of Rotorua, I take it you do not count training sessions which councillors attend outside of Rotorua? Am I totally correct with that?
That's correct. So where there's been a decision around attending particular training courses that have been made back through the governance team or through to the Mayor's office, that's different. So this is about that other part of training, which is attendance at conferences and other sort of events.
The second question is, if a conference is, say, held in Tauranga, which is 60 k's away, which is not too far away, and it was a one-day conference which is relevant to this area, would you accept councillors to attend that for the correct purposes?
On sister cities and international relationship, I think we've got a bit muddled up about elected councillors' responsibilities, and it may be it's a bit muddled because we've tried to cover off community boards attending national conferences and Te Tato coming to LGNZ conference. Really the purpose of this paper, as I see it, is international relationships, and that's a paper that I've been calling for 3 years.
Yes, yes, and the significant conferences that from time to time would benefit from our being there, or we would benefit from attending those. So really, that's really what it is. You know, usually there's travel, overnight, night stay, conference registration, those things involved. Councillor Gould.
I was quoting from page 34, Madam Chair, which states that the headline conference attendance for elected members policy.
Through Madam Chair, yes, the key focus was the first two issues that Her Worship raised, but really for me it was an opportunity to say, well, let's just keep that consistency of decision making coming through this. So I suppose answering specifically, even the short distance away, if it's a $2.5 or a $3 or a $5,000 course or whatever, I think the decision making on as to the relevance is still the business case approach, not the physical distance. It's the cost versus the benefit of the proposed conference or courses.
And I do know that we do have a professional development per budget available as well, so that might help. Ms. Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got two questions, and they're mainly focused on the points at page 26 and 27. I'm really interested in, and I support the concept of moving to a business, cost-benefit analysis model in determining which sister cities and what international relationships that we strategically focus on and take advantage of. I'm really interested in your initial thinking at this stage around how, what will be the metrics and the assessment around around doing the value proposition.
And I think the key there is it will be to a large degree subjective. So the first part of it is really what's the alignment with the strategic objectives that we've identified, that synchronicity around attendance around some of our own strategic objectives, say spa or mountain biking or involvement in, say, the sustainability compact city relationship. So there's three examples where I think there's a clear link for us that supports the brand as well as the areas of development we're trying to achieve. So I think those would have to be teased out, but as whether it's a hard metric consideration or a more of a discussion around this will support, this will evidence, this will show our links, this will improve our brand relationship. I think we've just got to develop that as we move through some of the business case discussions, and I think there will be a degree of evolution in how we try and present that.
Thank you for that. That's great. It's what I had anticipated would happen. The other thing that was quite interesting to me was that there's a discussion around RED, the Economic Development Entity, and we've had kōrero just previously around it being a CCO and it operates at arm's length. Just from my reading, it appears to me that they're quite passive in the analysis of the business proposal, and I'm just seeking to understand to what level of integration or the strategy team and the governance advisor, who sounds like they'll be drafting and making the calls, have, given the expertise we now have in CCO with Michelle's appointment?
I think that's an excellent question, and I think you've touched on something that is very important. Obviously the key staff involved are Debbie Cossa, who helped author this paper, but also Andrew Wilson, so from our lead advisor within that economic space. He has a very good relationship across to the CCO with Michelle, and we certainly know, well, Michelle's got some excellent skills, and as she clarifies their business plan and their focus areas, I think there'll be a lot of discussion around how that business case supports those relationships from council itself, but also into their own decision making about decisions to either go or receive delegations, and again back into the requests around elected members in that space. So I think there's going to be a lot of discussions, and I can't see it being a light touch. I actually think there'll be a lot of discussions about how effective that works together.
Supplementary, and that's great to hear. That's excellent, because I did sort of feel that potentially they've got their work stream and they've got their KPIs that they have to meet and report back to council on, and I just kind of wondered, is this something in addition that they'll be given, because they look like they were the implementation phase of the outcome of the business model analysis. So I just was thinking for their KPI reporting to have something sort of jump into their work plan that they maybe hadn't allocated resource or funding to might be a little bit disruptive.
And that's I think that tension in itself is good, because with the effort they have to put into being involved in these kind of processes, we should get back a very clear perspective about value from them in their involvement. So I think the way we're trying to do it is to make sure that we use the Mayor's office and the staff involved in this building to make sure we have a pretty clear picture about what's involved, who's coming, why, what they're hoping to achieve, and then a very good conversation across into Rotorua Economic Development about, and probably quite a firm view as to, is there value being created in this discussion and in our efforts that support our statement of intent. So I think what we're getting there is a good balance and a very sort of clear view of whether it meets their overall SOI objectives.
Yes. Clarification. Where you've got on page 29 the way that we respond to requests that come through the Mayor's office, where you've got the box Governance Policy Advisor Coordination, that is where I say, for goodness sake, ask Destination Rotorua the value of going here. I'm asked every week to go to nearly every city in China, Korea, and I go, I can't figure them out. So I seek that input as part of that box, that third box down. And a good example of that is at the end of next year, there's a Mayor's delegation going from LGNZ to China. And I'm asking of that unit, is there value in me going on that, or is it better that we work on a more targeted approach with countries that we have a relationship with? So I seek that advice every week. So it's there and it's alive and well. It's probably not depicted enough in that Governance Policy Advisor Coordination. Perhaps we could include in there. It's just, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't make a decision unless they said, don't go there. You know, in 3 months' time there's a major that we're going marketing in here. You could pop over there while you're here, you know. So they're more beneficial to me than holding it really in-house, and Andrew's involved as well from the economic development point of view.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Maxwell, then Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, I did have a question, and then later on when we get into the debate, I'll be supporting this. On page 28, so pleasing to see through the delegations, and I'm pleased that many of us are part of these. Can I ask JP, in 2013, with us receiving 76,000 that year, and it's dropped down to, which is still good, 33, 36, 42,000, is it because we let the person go who, the half, what do we call it, something, why is that?
No, it wasn't related to that. The position that we had left a couple of years prior to that, or a year prior to that. This is us responding to offshore delegations wanting to come and visit through us, so it wasn't necessarily initiated by us at all. This is the ones that simply approach us to say, hey, we would like to come and visit Rotorua and receive a talk or a discussion on a particular topic. So my only question there is there was just a change in obviously the travel arrangements in a number of countries, which must have affected how many delegations were seeking to come to Rotorua.
Could it also have been the people-to-people one, which I see has dropped off a bit as well? Was that payment, Carol, for the people-to-people programs that used to come here? That was voluntary, eh? So, yeah. But, I mean, I'm pleased you gave us this information, which shows that we are, from a lot of the visits that we get, and that we are getting revenue, and that there, and it could be spent wisely, and us strengthening the sister city programs and economic cities and things like that. So, yep, looking forward to the debate.
Yes, JP, thank you, Councillor Maxwell. We are getting revenue, but what else actually do we get from those? Very little, you know, and I think so. I suspect we're likely to get a lot less in terms of dollars from now on.
Madam Chair, but the levels that we receive, it is probably better to assume that we're in that sort of 30 to 40,000 per annum. But I think the key aspect here is it does rely on the support of elected members, and at the moment we've been heavily mining two particular councillors' time to support those visits and help with those presentations. So again, we are restricted to a degree by the availability of those two councillors. So again, this is part of that. It's also affected by who can front up and support those visiting delegations within that process. So again, we're probably safe to assume it's about 30 to 40,000 that we should be receiving. So what we're saying is that's probably the first place to draw on any costs related to receiving delegations or to support travel overseas. Just one other thing I'd just like to add in regard to just talking about the business case value is obviously that requirement to do the written reports coming back to council. So that's another chance really for you to check in to say, actually we were told that there would be these benefits or this support, and receiving back that report on what that visit involved and some of the outcomes of those. You get another chance to sort of really test, is it delivering what we expect as a visit.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart, then Councillor Kent.
Madam Chair, I've got a question on pages 32, 33 and 34 of each. And I hope you'll bear with me because I think there's some historical matters that we need to be aware of. I think it's important that in the policy, under the word policy, and representatives of Te Tauao Te Arawa Board attend as council delegates, that we add and one Lakes and one Rural Community Board. It's up to them who goes and it's up to us who goes. So I think that needs to be included in there. And in terms of the mayoral and elected representatives' international travel, I mean, they've got to put a business case up. And it's got to go to the CEO and come to council. So I don't think it is going to be willy-nilly. So I'm quite comfortable with that. The only other thing, I'll go back to the local government conferences. Traditionally, the mayor and his wife, and the deputy mayor and his wife, or wives or husbands, whatever it is, have traditionally gone to local government conference. And it's because you're expecting sometimes to be away 3 and 4 days. It's in Invercargill or Dunedin. Some days we get off dirt cheap because it's you know, you can drive there on the day. But other times I think that has been the case where husbands and wives have been able to go, and I think that's the only thing we as elected representatives get in terms of networking with our colleagues from around New Zealand. I think it's really important we include the Lakes and the Rural Community Board, because they have their own area, like the rural people have their own area, and so on. Metropolitans have their own area of expertise, so I think that's important. So I'll put that on the table. I want to hear what other members say. And the Sister Cities one, I mean, if everybody did what it says in paragraph 2, there would be no Sister Cities. If everyone waited for someone else to do the initiative or show some initiative in terms of contact and that sort of thing, they would all die. So Council has seen a decline in active contact with the majorities. That's true, and the word inactive is considered inactive. Contact is initiated and sustained by current sister cities, and when that contact is considered beneficial to council. I mean, don't we go to sister cities conference anymore? Is that how inactive it's got? I mean, I was a president of sister cities at one stage. So it depends who's driving it, and I mean, we used to have a dedicated staff member who was responsible for what you're talking about before, JP. That's the international visits, the delegations, the sister cities, the people to people. That's all they did. They made sure that their contact was kept, and that relationship was kept active. Because, I mean, Bipu was started in the 90s, Klamath Falls in the 60s, Lake Macquarie was Kevin Winter's legacy, and Weiju has been relatively recent in the last 5 or 6 years, and things do change. And I mean, if they die off, they die off. I'm not worried about that either, but I still think we should be playing an active role in what sister cities do. We've had sister cities conferences here. It is an important springboard for relationships between countries, and I mean, I consider the sister cities concept with the school from Hamarudai. That, I mean, my children, we've piloted those kids. That relationship with Western Heights has been going, must be 20 years, and it only came about because of the sister cities relationship with Beppu. So
thank you, Councillor Stewart. I think what we're trying to do here is actually engage the value of any relationship with the sister city or anyone else, and obviously the value of going off to conferences and things like that. I mean, there has to be a value, and it comes back to actually how do we measure, as Miss Morrison was saying, what's the metric? You know, how do we actually measure the criteria for us getting off or getting away? What are we measuring that by? How do we know that we're going to get the benefits from expenditure going off to these things, and having people visit with us as well? If the benefit isn't there, then we shouldn't really be spending time and effort on them. So, Councillor Kent, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to raise the question as to whether, in fact, the delegation shouldn't actually be a function of the cultural ambassador, since we're trying to put on a professional image and a professional presentation to international people visiting this council. I would have thought that should have been part of the cultural ambassador's role, and I just wonder what everyone else thinks.
Certainly I'd like to think there would be input, but Your Worship, you might want to, because I know that you really travel without, on occasions, and certainly in the past.
I think you're right about delegations, but boy, there's a lot of them. So it's been great that Councillor Gould's also helped Councillor Maxwell to do them. And we welcome that extra help from other councillors, because sometimes, some weeks, they're particularly heavy. There's very little it's hard to measure the actual value to Rotorua from them. I'd be very honest about that. But if we're making a little bit of revenue, I suggest it should be reinvested into supporting sister city relationships, because there is a cost there. So, and you've helped, other councillors have helped, and I think that's good if we can widen the burden, the responsibility. But I myself don't think there's a lot of gain from those delegations, but they love coming here, they love coming into council, and they love meeting a councillor and the cultural ambassador. And who knows, when one of those delegations doesn't decide, I'm coming back to reinvest in Rotorua, we never hear, if I'm honest. We never really know the yield from them. But they're part of being an international destination and a visitor destination and a tourist destination. I don't think they take a lot of energy, but I'm sure Councillor Gould and the Deputy and Trevor will speak to that. I just, are we getting into the debate now? Well, if we're getting into the debate, I just welcome this paper. For 3 years I've called for this paper, so that there is transparency, so that people don't say these are junkets that we're going on, that they are targeted and they're linked to our unique propositions, and they are now. I don't bother with other international events that have no bearing at all on where we're trying to take Rotorua as a tourist or a wood or a mountain biking or a spa health and wellness destination. So there are major investment propositions. And I think here there's a very good comment on page 28, that we've been reasonably successful. I'd say we've been incredibly successful on the sniff of an oily rag. We have no FTE delegated to help with this role, and I've been screaming out that we have some sort of filter system some process for accepting which are the ones of net worth for us to be involved in, and is it cost effective for us to be engaged. So I'm very pleased to have this. It's much more open. You've received a report in the past. There are many ways that these come. I would get 2 to 3 requests a week. Beppu is the very strong sister city. Wuzhong has enormous potential, but we've got to be careful about where it goes, and that's where I seek external advice on. And we give gifts, and we're very careful about the gifting. They've got to tell the Rotorua story. They're usually little wooden gifts. We're very careful that they're culturally significant to tell the story. We don't spend extravagantly. We get great support from partner organisations to purchase the gifts. I think we've been very, very clever with how we've managed this, and I've sought a bit more support, and I'm delighted to see this because what we haven't done well is close the loop. So we haven't made sure we've kept on doing the things that we promised we'd do in sister city relationships. And so we've now got someone that will close that loop, that will keep checking that we have got back, that we are moving issues that we promised on the table to move. And one of the greatest gains, I think, is international education. And you mentioned that, Councillor Stewart, about Hamararo. Well, the CCO has a focus on international education with Waiariki or Tō Ohomai, and we welcome those visitors here, and a lot of our students travel. I just went the other day to Western Heights to meet the returning rugby trip from Beppu to ask them, what was your view of it? What did you learn? Was it worthwhile? And it's good for those school students to know that we're interested. Is there any gain? Has it made a difference in your lives? So this, I think, is a paper that doesn't offer a lot more in terms of resourcing, but it's much more focused about where we put our energies. And it stops the embarrassment of, quite frankly, does my husband pay? Does he, is he paid or not? Because on most of these, he has paid himself. And I've been embarrassed by OIA requests about, what sort of visits has the Mayor been on with the Mayoress. Well, so this is clear, and we'll report it back in the business case. Most of these international meetings also, if they want you there to present, such as Genjo, they paid. And I said I wouldn't go just to attend a conference unless I could be a keynote speaker. So unless I could tell the Rotorua story. And you sit back and wait, will they come back? They did. So it didn't cost the ratepayers of Rotorua anything. And I think that's where we've got to be very, very careful about ratepayers' money. So I'm in full support of this.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Mr. Berryman Kemp, then Ms. Morrison.
Yes, and so just to confirm, we are in the debate part right now because I've got that mixed up just for. Come on, cool. Look, really, the only comment that I wanted to make on this was again to consider the cultural benefits in terms of achieving our various strategic plans of these trips. Because again, it's that thing that I see a lot in the report in terms of economic, tourism returns, everything else. I go back to the workshops, I go back to the Rotorua Way discussions and things like that. There is the opportunity through these sister city visits to think strategically as to who we may be better placed with. Sounds as if Lake Macquarie may not be strategically the best fit for us, but there may be other opportunities in the future where we can place ourselves globally. So that's the one comment that I wanted to make on this, that I think again in terms of a decision matrix on who should we be partnering with, consider that from a cultural perspective as well in terms of providing us as a unique proposition in terms of local government.
Thank you, Mr. Berryman Kemp. JP, can I just ask a question? Do we have any relationship with Te Puia in terms of, possibly a shared delegation or I'm not sure. Do we ever talk to them about some opportunities there? so far?
Short answer is yes. And,
oh, good.
And I think
right.
the Deputy Mayor and the Mayor might be able to comment further on the specifics of some of those relationships.
Thank you. Ms Morrison?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just was seeking some clarification. I wanted to ask a question about recommendation 3, which has been requested from the floor, and just seeking, do I ask it now or wait until it's been moved?
Please put it now, yes.
I was just wanting more clarification on what that actually means, that their attendance of the community board members is delegated to each community board. So do they decide from their own funding bucket, or is the decision made and then it comes back into this general fund?
I'd taken from the discussion that we had and was that they would make decisions about their attendance at the community board conference, and that was the intention of the business, of them being delegated that. So I'd be curious for that clarification as well as to who put that forward.
I think it was yes, thank you. I think it was about, because the boards have their own, well, obviously their own conference, yes, but they're also, I know, because the lakes were there before, now we have the rural community, and they were looking at how we can assist them to have sort of more control, or more, would that be the right word? More say, autonomy, that's it, more autonomy. So if they see something, and it shouldn't just be the community board conference, it should be others that they think might be appropriate to their learning, for transfer of skills, etc. So that's what that meant, but I mean, whether it's put to the extent that it's clear, maybe we need to think about that as well, so that they can actually decide for themselves.
Great, thank you for the clarification. And I suppose, and I think that's brilliant. I think that's appropriate that the community boards, and likewise with Te Tatou,
yes.
We have a separate funding pool that we decide around our professional development. The only, I think, comment that I would say is, I'm sitting here feeling like Te Tatou and the partnership is becoming an interest group, because and it's probably something that I'm just flagging because it's not appropriate for this discussion on this specific thing, but and I do support the community board and its legislatively model, but just flagging that there's a partnership here, and Te Arawa has a distinct and unique relationship with the council that I'd just like to have noted and reminded, and it's something probably at the exec level and through our chairs that can be discussed further.
Thank you, thank you. I wouldn't like to give the impression, or I wouldn't like it to be seen that, what did you use the expression you used, an interest group, yes. For me now, I sort of take it for granted that you're in there, you know, as of, in all of our discussions, so maybe we do need to have that conversation at some stage. Because I wouldn't like to think that that is, I don't see it like that at all. I see it as being very, very necessary part of our, yes, please.
You'll get the report at the next committee meeting about the Beppu trip that I just went on. Now, because it was organised before the election, no one could promise to be there. So I said you'd have to wait to see the outcome of the election, and then the Mayor of Beppu came back and said, we want you, regardless, because it was an issue of cultural tattoos. Now, I felt that that would be a perfect opportunity to take someone from Te Puia who was a cultural tattooist. But it was an issue of resourcing at that stage, but we made it very clear at Beppu that we will follow up this issue, and we will be bringing other members when we discuss that issue there. Not me, it's not for me to discuss. So it was much wider, and I sought some advice about who would come, and is it the cultural ambassador, or is it, in this case, it was identified to me that it was probably somebody better from Te Puia who was a cultural tattooist. So that is in our thinking who should accompany us. But don't forget, we also have a unique benefit here of having a cultural ambassador. So a lot of these delegations, I have to say it, and Trevor wouldn't say it, you can't go to China without them asking where is Councillor Maxwell. So and international relationships in these destinations are about relationships.
Thank you. Yes. Want to put your microphone on? Thank you.
Ms Morrison brought the issue up about number 3. So we're going to ask the community boards to decide whether they want to go to the conferences or not. I think it should be as of right that Rotorua has a voice at that community board conference table. And in number 3, in page 34, we've got that we will send the mayor, the deputy mayor, the chief executive, 2 councillors, and a representative from Te Tauta or Te Arawa, and they will select who will go. So what's the difference? Why can't we have in there and the Lakes and the Rural Community Board?
Madam Chair, because I did raise that issue there. So in previous discussions, and I think it's Mr Thomas has raised the distinction between the role of community boards and council. So that's one aspect, but community boards have their own national conference. I'm not talking about the LGNZ conference, and I think it should be up to, all I was suggesting there was the individual boards should make a decision about which of their members attend that conference. That's all I was saying there. I actually wasn't referring to the LGNZ conference.
Well, I think with the addition of 3 there, that would cover that off. Thank you. It's yes. Sorry, I just went. There's a few other councillors that would like to speak. Councillor Gord, then Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With the delegations coming in, I'd like to point out that other businesses in Rotorua do benefit from them, with transport, petrol, accommodation, meals. Quite often they pay for an interpreter from Rotorua to interpretate at the council meetings, and they also go around to some of the tourist attractions to see what's happening, what's great and everything. So it is a huge advantage for Rotorua businesses by Rotorua Lakes Council hosting these particular people at a fee.
Thank you very much.
But I want to carry on with something else.
Beg your pardon, thank you.
Now, with the overseas sister cities, I've been on 2 sister cities visits to Lake Macquarie, 2 to Beppu, 1 to China, 1 with Mayor Winters, 1 with Mayor Hall to Lake Macquarie, which Councillor Trevor Maxwell was on, and the late Deputy Mayor Johnny Lepper was on, and also the late Councillor Mitamoi was on, and a couple of other councillors as well. That party had about 35 people, and they signed an agreement, which Graham did with the Mayor over there. The Beppu one, to me, the Lake Macquarie shouldn't be a sister city. We're actually not getting a huge advantage from them, in my opinion. We would be better looking at Korea, where we've got the Mud Festival next year in Rotorua. Again, because of a visit to Rotorua, they came back to us, and Mayor Chadwick negotiated with them to have a Mud Festival, which government are providing money for, which is a huge advantage. We should be probably looking at an area in Korea as a sister city, and probably the Mud Festival city would probably be a good place to start. The Beppu people, we've got a huge number of Rotorua residents which go over to Japan in either sporting events or social events or biking events or education events. We're also getting a huge number of, we did at that stage get a huge number of Japanese students come back to Rotorua to go to the language academy schools to learn English, including the daughter of the mayor of Beppu at that stage. The Chinese one, China is a huge country. There is a gap. We have built up a very good relationship with Nanjing City, which built Rotorua Town, which again we've had a lot of Chinese people come to visit Rotorua for a couple of nights. So that has helped dramatically in the improvement of Rotorua. We've also had a number of Rotorua businesses which have exported product over to China and Japan, including Lockwood sending a Lockwood house to Beppu, and have got a friendship house there for people to go in. And with Beppu, it is a geothermal area like Rotorua. So I think, and we should probably not look at not having Klamath Falls as a sister city and Lake Macquarie as a sister city, because to me it's not much, there's very little benefit at the present time.
Well, thank you very much, Councillor Gould, for expressing where we do gain benefits from the visits, and but I suspect Macquarie and the other falls, I think over a period of time they will just slowly drift away, and that should be allowed to happen. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you.
Donaldson.
I think Councillor Gould covered a couple of things in that, but can I say let's not drop anybody off unless we replace it with something better from that country, be it Lake Macquarie. We mightn't see any economic benefit. I'll tell you what benefit that I did see from happening there. They came here to our council because there was a strong relationship between the Mayor of Lake Macquarie and Graham Hall at the time. Most of the councillors were similar to some people saying, let's not have it, and all that kind of thing. They were lukewarm. But when they visited us, they went back and they were strong about setting it up. And what they did do is culturally, for the first time ever, because they were welcomed here, a Maori welcome and everything, and their big question to us was, how did you get the indigenous people into the council building? So they went back, we gave a bit of advice. They went back, and for the first time ever they had Aboriginals in the council building, and they did the welcome for us. And so Mitamohi was a big influence in that area. But the other one is the Rotorua town, Nanjing town. That's a huge success. That's why we added Nanjing as an economic city, because of 300 homes being built there, gated community, Rotorua town. There's been about 11 delegations over the years since it started, some 40 at a time, and that's huge. That's been really great for us. So that's a huge success. Beppu is a success, and I'm aware that even next year I think the rugby team going back again, and they've been visiting here at the World Tourism Conference. Fortunately, that Mayor Stevie himself attended. The most pleasing thing is a lot of people there knew of Rotorua. We're on the map. So we are an international city. We're the tourism capital of New Zealand, the heart of Maoridom, and I think those are all the things that are our point of difference. So I support the report, and that's here, and let's strengthen it. I'd love Jeff and the executive to have a look at a dedicated person. You had half FTE before, but Tom Baker in the past, Sue White in the past, and I think if you have a dedicated person, correspondence strengthens. This is why a lot underneath is not happening. If we had someone there, but that's for you to consider. And can I talk about the delegations that are coming over? It only cost an hour and a quarter for here.
You need to keep it relevant.
I thought I had 10 minutes.
Well, I think you've had that.
The delegations are only an hour. Look, we had 2 this week, and the group that came here, they spoke fondly of the fact that David Longy visited their city. And so, I mean, that's how many years ago? 20. They still remember. So I look upon all these delegations as positive. Everyone is different. Everyone has something, and you never know what may come from it. So very strongly supportive of that, and good to see the policies being strengthened a bit. Kia ora.
Thank you. I'd like to think that we will include our Te Tato partnerships when our delegations come to town, should they so wish. I'm sure they might like to have some input into that, and it really is getting back to what Miss Morrison said, actually.
And just finally, I did want to say that during our workshops, which has only been in the last couple of weeks, and that the International Sister City one scored well, scored highly.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson, then Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of comments. I mean, I support the policy and I support part 2 and 3 of the recommendation. Just from my point of view, it's been my expectation that should my wife be free and keen to accompany me to an LGNZ conference, it's at my cost and or her cost. She earns more than me. And the same for the dinner and partner program. I mean, that's absolutely cool, and as it should be. And so yeah, I just want to make that point. I mean, we do have other relationships through our PPP. So the cultural and economic relationship with Whistler is being fostered through Mountain Bike Events Limited, and we've made approach to Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment for part of their funding to foster that cultural connection. So I think this just clears the deck as far as Council's concerned, and I'm in full support. I'd be happy to move that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have heard the Chief Executive's explanation as to the reasons why Rotorua economic development is treated differently to this council, and I'm personally not at all happy with that. And I signify that I will be moving an amendment to test that with my colleagues for the very simple reason that it matters not to the public whether an elected representative's trip is being paid for out of a budget from a CCO, or whether it's coming out of the council's budget, main budget. Either way, it is still ratepayer funds that are being spent, and the ratepayers have a right to know, and the council should be approving it. So I think that there should be no distinction whatsoever between elected representatives travelling in accordance with this policy, and it should be approved whether the funding for that trip is coming from the CCO or whether it's coming from council. So I would like to just somehow...
Yes, I can take your amendment now because we haven't got a seconder for Councillor Donaldson, so we'll take your amendment and then see the lay of the land. Thank you. So I'm just trying to get...
Amendment?
Well, we're just going to put it, we'll just put it up first so that we're clear about what it is. Perhaps you could help us with... Yep. So really you're saying that the policy applies not only to council but to our CCOs. Yeah, right. Yep. Yeah.
Could I speak to that? I'm happy with. I could second that.
Have a seconder. Yes, there, and Councillor Stewart, you were moving the second. You were moving so we could have a discussion. Thank you.
I thought I had, but
no. Before I.
Seconder are happy with that alteration, Madam Chair.
We'll just get that up. The mover for the amendment, of course, was our Councillor Kent, and the seconder to that amendment was Councillor Stewart. So we can open it up for conversation because at this stage we did not have a seconder for Councillor Donaldson. So the amendment will be heard first. Thank you. Some advice from. Thank you, JP.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. Through the Chair. I just wanted some clarification too on the other part that was put forward by Councillor Sturt about the representatives from the community boards also attending the Local Government New Zealand conference. I deliberately didn't include them within this policy as it currently stands. There was some discussion when Te Tato was added because of the partnership to the Local Government New Zealand conference attendance, so that was quite specific discussions we'd previously had. I had assumed, and I was taking the clarity that I thought I'd received from the Deputy Mayor, that there is a separation and there is a conference specifically for community boards.
And there is.
And so I thought that was the right decision in that space, because they are different focuses to those two areas. So I'm just seeking some clarification. You did raise it, but I don't know if it has been picked up, whether it is the right decision to add community board representatives to the Local Government New Zealand as well.
It's clear. Yeah. No, it's so you get, that stands as you've got it there under 3. Thank you. So we go back to can we just yes, thank you, but can we just make it very clear as to where the amendment exactly is? It's that. Thank you very much. Yes, Your Worship, please.
I've got no problem with that. There hasn't been an instance in 3 years where I've been paid by a council-controlled organisation to attend a policy conference, so it has been fully transparent in the reports back to this council. So there's no problem with that should it arise in the future.
Yes, thank you. Yes, please. Thank you. Your CEO.
Councillors, can I just to provide some advice on this? You've got I think, and I'll look to JP on this as well, some irregularity therefore in your policy now, in that what you are saying is that in part of the policy where an elected member is invited, but the invitation, for example, comes from a sister city where those costs are met, there is no requirement for permission to be provided through this policy. So in other words, cost is actually your key driver here. The second point now, though, that you're making is that in the situation of a CCO, the CCO is able to make a decision with regards to committing their own budget. You cannot stop a CCO effectively committing their budget. Otherwise, effectively, we would be disbanding the board and moving them back into a council organisation. What you are therefore, through this amendment, asking, however, is that if the CCO is looking to invite the mayor, for example, or the cultural ambassador, is that even though the CCO sees justification in those costs being met, you require a business case for those parties who are being invited from council to travel, which to me sounds a rather irregular way of actually dealing with a council-controlled organisation. Being clear that a council-controlled organisation has its own board, it has its own policies and processes and so on, and part of those policies and processes deal with international travel. They do not have necessarily the same policies as the council itself. So effectively what you're doing is that you're putting an additional overlay over the decision making of the CCO, which really isn't applying to the CCO. It's applying to whether or not the mayor or another councillor who is being invited is able to travel on the invitation of the CCO, and also, and that would require obviously a business case through council. Now all that may mean is that the CCO simply says, well, we'll be doing this anyway, we simply will not make the invitation. So that's the potential environment that you're creating around the implication of this amendment.
Yes, Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hear that, and this is part of the problem of operating with CCOs. The issue is that the ratepayers are paying their rates to this council to run the business of this council. Part of that council business is a CCO, and yes, the CCO does have its own elected board that has the ability to make certain decisions. However, from the perspective of ratepayers out there, if they see the mayor or any other elected representative travelling what they perceive as being on council business, the first question that is going to be asked is, who authorised it, how much, and why are we paying for it? Give us the business case. I think we have to make that very, very transparent. Now, if there is an issue with the way that's been expressed there, in the way that the Chief Executive has explained the conflict between the two boards, there is a much simpler solution, which is just to delete the words including Rotorua economic development from the policies on page 32 and 33 and omit it from this resolution, because it then does not create the exception with the CCOs, but it is clear to everyone that this council is actually approving international travel or whatever by elected representatives, and I think that would resolve the issue.
I tend to agree that that's the way that could well and truly be covered off. Yes. So we can...
Can I suggest that we just change that with the following amendment, that the words including Rotorua economic development be deleted from the sister facility relationship policy and the mayor and elected representatives international travel policy.
Thank you, that's clear. Councillor Stewart, are you still... That is an amendment. And thank you for that explanation. I think that does make it a lot clearer. I'll just get some guidance from our CEO.
Look, I look to JP on this one because, look, I'm worried now that you've just defeated what you actually were trying to put up, because effectively, by removing those words, effectively it means that the CCO will be able to just simply request an elected representative attend a particular delegation, and there will be no requirement, because it is paid as is that last policy, for any type of... Sorry, all right, I'll withdraw that comment.
Sorry, we've got a case of double negatives here. We are deleting an exclusion.
Yeah, and that's right. And you're just taking out them altogether.
So am I just... So if we end up in a situation, and maybe it's a scenario discussion, a local organisation called Rotorua Economic Development wants to take the mayor to Beppu or to China, to me that's an exclusion, so they can. I'm no, that's not what it is. It's the policy does not include elected representatives that has been undertaken at the request or paid for by other organisations. So to me, it is that keeps it separate from the business case. So a business case would not be required in that circumstance. So I think we have actually left them out.
Sorry. The policy here is relating to paid for by other international, national or local organisations. We then get into the debate as to whether the CCO is another organisation or not. I think the clarity is the fact that if the council's paying for it, no matter which pocket it's coming out of, it should be part of this policy. To actually create an exclusion that says Rotorua economic development does not have to agree with this policy is wrong. By getting rid of that, they agree with this policy the same as the rest of council, so it is a council policy. We can take it from there, because presumably any business case is still going to come forward and still going to be approved by chief executives and so on, so we don't have the issue.
You to take some discussion on that. Ms Morrison?
I think we're getting tangled.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This whole discussion is getting me a little bit uneasy about the lengths to which is appropriate or contractually or legislatively that, able for the council to reach into and dictate to the CCO what they can do. And I'd be great to hear from our legal or governance advisors on what is the risk around us passing this, and does it have any implications for the council in terms of breaches of legislative arm's length transactions? Because the small, if we pass this, perhaps the small change might actually have wider unintended consequences that are more of a compliance headache for the council than actually what sounds like a desire to have full disclosure of what who is going on CCO-funded trips. So just thinking we may be using a sledgehammer to crack a small peanut, and I'm worried about the ongoing risk.
Thank you.
Look, Ms Morrison is correct, but to be very clear that this policy will not automatically apply to a CCO. What does apply within this policy is the ability of and I'm sorry, I'm using your worship as a continual example, but what applies is whether or not a member of this council can respond to an invitation of the CCO. It does not apply to the decision of the CCO. It only applies with respect to the ability of the member of council to respond to the invitation. Now, my advice to you on this one is that it's liable that the CCO will be thinking twice about whether or not they are therefore an invite elected representative. Now, if that is your intent, then that is exactly what it is that you'll get. And I think if I captured or understood what Councillor Kent was saying, that the intent of this change is to ensure that the whole of council sees a business case where there is an invitation from a council-controlled organisation to an elected representative to attend an overseas delegation. That's really what you're aiming to achieve. But you can't control the CCO's decision making with respect to making that offer and to making that offer on the condition that the trip is, for example, paid for. You can't control that part, but you can control whether or not the elected representative accepts that offer. And in order to accept the offer, you can also apply the condition that a business case is required.
Thank you. Yes, we're starting to get there. Yes, Councillor.
Madam Chair, can I just pick up on the Chief Executive's comment, and I wonder if this amendment to the policy might support that. So if you go down and look at the document, just on if we inserted a sentence before the last sentence on the policy on page 32, which read something along the lines of, a business case for attendance should also be provided to support council transparency. So if we that just brings that in so that there's the request for attendant. So it doesn't give a yes/no, but it provides it there for the information that provides that transparency.
Madam Chair, it already says that higher up in the policy.
I think that's what you're wanting to get clear. What was the supports the?
It already says to be supported by a business case higher up in the policy, so that's not necessary.
Yes, Your Worship.
What you're really wanting, I understand, is transparency, but actually you also want the fact in the report back that there was value in this, that it fits with our economic development propositions and we're doing something about it. So something might happen from it, an investment or a Terry Stevens visit. If you didn't have that, you wouldn't get that report back. That's part of the business case.
Request to council that they want to take yourself and Councillor Tapsell. Business case, they have to put a business case up to their board in order to approve the trip for themselves to go. So why is there any difference including you in that? I think you're cracking that is the right one.
We just get a copy of their business case presented with the request that comes through, because that's what the transparency, they've invited them because it's going to Jamaica and they think it's a good idea, they've passed it, and we say good on you.
One assumes they have got they do put up a business case, and I'd like to think that they would, but we don't know. Yes, Councillor Sturt. Kent, I beg your pardon, I was looking there and sorry, Councillor Kent.
Thank you, I'm glad the apology was this way. I think if we just exclude the words including Rotorua economic development, it gets rid of any inference that we're trying to include Rotorua economic development in this policy or exclude it from this policy whatsoever. This policy is about how this council acts in terms of how its elected representatives respond to invitations, and it doesn't matter who the invitation's coming from. So if we've got rid of the words including Rotorua economic development from both those policies, the issue's gone away. We are still getting the accountability because it's still got to be supported by a business case. It's still got to be approved by a chief executive, and it doesn't really matter whether it's this chief executive or a CCO's chief executive. It is still being supported by the business case, and that's the whole scenario that we are trying to achieve. The thing is, let's not put in an exclusion that says they can do it differently.
Thank you. I need some support here. My head's starting to go a little bit like that, so maybe it's probably just me.
Look, I think the problem that you've got with that change, I can see what you're trying to do, and just looking to JP to check this out. By definition, a CCO is a local organisation. So therefore, if you exclude that reference, you are effectively acting against what you're trying to achieve. So please excuse me, I'm just trying to help you through on this one. So actually, what it says in the last paragraph are exclusions to the policy. That's a paragraph excluding coverage. If you don't name the CCOs in there, they are by definition a local organisation, then by nature you'd have to say that they're included as an exclusion.
Then perhaps we need to include a word that says national or other unrelated local organisations, and then we've covered it. Or something like that.
Or non-council, or is that what you... Sorry? Okay, so let's have another look at it. Councillor Hunt, you wanting to...
I think it's leaving it as it is, so I'm going to speak against the amendment. I see the value in having it named. It is a CCO, if using the example that they invite the Mayor and Councillor Tapsaloff to Jamaica. Part of our new rules about asking for a leave of absence is so we know where the councillors are going, and they have done the reasons why they're going to be going will be made very clear to us. We have no control over their money. We have delegated that under a CCO. So therein ends our responsibility to how they choose to spend that. Yes, but we have delegated that budget to them. And they have a set of KPIs which they report on. Now, when we review those set of KPIs, we regard this as really important that that's in there. That is the time to insert a measurement to measure that and to have it reported on. Leaving it as it is, including Rotorua economic development, means that they operate at arm's length as they have been set up to do as they see fit. If it includes inviting someone, leave of absence is put in, we're all quite clear where they're going, why they're going, what they're doing, and yes, there is an expectation they would, out of their budget, we would get a report back. And so I think that we should just leave it as it is. I'm voting against the amendment on that point.
Madam Chair, I second that. What you don't want to incentivise is perverse behaviour. You don't want to tuck these things away. That's the last thing you want. Well, so I think leave it as it is.
Well, no, we'll have to... Councillor Kent put an amendment.
Yeah, well, I spoke against that.
Sorry. Yes, sorry. Was it something? Yes, Councillor Kumar.
Sorry, I said, shall we vote on it then?
Oh, right. No, we've actually got an amendment that was put by Councillor Kent and seconded by Councillor Stewart for the purposes of discussion. And if discussion now, but now it's been changed, hasn't it? So I'm a little bit lost. That's not what you had...
So all we have done is that the words in the policy as it was were including Rotary Economic Development, which meant Rotary Economic Development acted as a local organisation and could simply just invite the Mayor without the requirement of a business case and the process through council. So we've reversed that to say excluding council-controlled organisations, which I think Councillor Kent gives effect to what it is that you're trying to achieve.
Not just limited to the Rotorua Economic Development CCO. Would that fit your purpose? That covers it. Thank you. So, right. I'm going to put... Yes, thank you. So I don't believe there's any further discussion, unless you'd, Councillor Kent, you'd... Otherwise, I'm just going to put that amendment. Thank you, please, thank you. I'll put that amendment. That the words... the amendment is that the words including Rotorua Economic Development be replaced with excluding council-controlled organisations in the mayoral and elected... Sorry, I just can't... Oh, I should be looking over in the mayoral and elected representatives, international travel policy, and the sister city relationship policy. So that's been moved by Councillor Kent, seconded by Councillor Stewart. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Thank you. I think we'll have to have a show of hands on that. Thank you. All those in favour of that policy, please raise your right hand. And thank you. Thank you. And those against, please. So the amendment is lost. So thank you. So that means we go back to the original wording in there. Just go back to the... So that amendment is left in the minutes though, but it comes down out, falls down. Thank you. So I think I'd like to put further discussion. Thank you. Is there any further discussion? I know we've had quite a lot, so if we can make it brief, please. Thank you, Councillor Maxwell.
Okay, there's a question to JP. Information, my memory serves me right, we held a community board conference here in Rotorua, and a profit was made from that, and you know, which was great, and it was a good conference too. What happened to, what did we do?
They did make a profit. It was a reasonably substantial one that they have been spending over the subsequent years. They still have a balance that has been set aside and is still available for the Lakes Community Board to disperse. It's sitting at about $18,000 remaining, so they still have those funds, and that's been drawn to their attention.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you for the discussion on this item. I am going to put number 2 and 3. It's been moved by Councillor Donaldson, seconded by Her Worship. Number 2, that the committee recommends to Council the adoption of the following policies: Sister City Relationship Policy, the mayoral and elected representatives international travel policy, conference attendance for elected members policy as shown on attachment 3, and number 3, that the attendance at community board conferences be delegated to each community board. Moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. Contrary? Thank you. Carried. We do have lunch at 1 o'clock. I wonder if we could perhaps, we've got the meeting schedule. I don't think that's... Thank you. I mean, you've all got your meeting schedule. It's... Thank you. So, well, yes. Thank you. Well, I'll just ask for a mover and a seconder, please. Thank you. It's moved by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Maxwell, that the report schedule of meetings for the 1st of January to the 31st of December 2017 be received. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Thank you. Yes, Councillor Donaldson.
Doesn't affect my vote. I support Madam Chair. I just had a question that perhaps JP or Una could help me with. It's just around there was nothing in the discussion around the timings for the 4 audit and risk committee meetings. Not the time of the day, just the timing in their annual calendar, how they line up with quarterly reports, that sort of thing. Was there any thought about that, or just where it's convenient.
I think to be confirmed at this stage. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Berryman Kim.
Yes, and I support it too, and certainly appreciate having this time frame. My one comment is a request in terms of there is a specific mention on management of agendas to ensure timeliness. I'd also like to ask that that's extended to management of board pack distribution, because I must confess it's getting quite tight to crank quite a lot of information with a decent bit of thought if we only receive it 2 days prior.
Yes, thank you very much, and I do think it's. I think we've been a little bit aware of some of the, how would you say, the crunch to get some of these things through before the end of the year, as we've been working through the workshops and everything else. And there was a big distraction, I have to say, around this court case that staff had just spent so much time there on that matter. So, but you're quite right. And normally we certainly would get our papers. I think we try to get them out at least 6 to 7 days beforehand. And I suspect that as we go into the new terranium that there'll be more papers coming at us, so we do need the time to absorb. So thank you for that reminder to us. Councillor Kent, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just questions relating to how come suddenly we've got 2 statutory hearing days set aside every month when I understood we only had a relatively few statutory hearings. And are there no scheduled RMA Policy Committee meetings, because there aren't any on this list?
I think what we do is, and I'll be staying corrected on this, but what we've tried to do is to factor them in, so should they be required. But I think early in the month we'll know straight away, actually even before that, whether we'll need them. But if we don't have them factored in, we've got a hell of a mishmash trying to get them in. So that would be the reason. Thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one quick question, but first of all, thank Carol for a tremendous job in putting this together for the holidays. Good to get this before Christmas. The one I'm asking about is annual plan forums, annual plan hearings, and annual plan deliberations. Is this back to how we used to do it before? JP.
With submissions, you're talking about with public submissions?
You know,
that process.
Oh,
okay. For you, Madam Chair, it is still the new process. However, this time we are anticipating an amendment to the LTP, so therefore we are already planning to do to allow for a consultation document, submissions, and deliberations. So that's what we are expecting. Obviously, subject to your final decision. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, JP.
Madam Chair, just picking up on Councillor Kent's earlier question, the statutory hearing days are intended for the RMA Policy Committee, so those are the dates that we've cited, particularly around hearing if there's plan changes or looking at that work. So those are our 2 reserved days for us to work through that program.
Thank you. And I think, as most of us know, that wherever possible we certainly try to keep to these, because if we do have to move anything, it just complicates things. So it is good to get this out as early as possible. Councillor Hunt, then Councillor Gould.
I'm going to make a comment that the same with the DLC and the stat hearings, they're placeholders. So should a hearing be required for a dog hearing or anything else, then we've actually set those dates aside. So that's fairly common.
Yes, because it is difficult trying to factor them in later.
I'm just trying to see, have we put any spare dates in? I'm just trying to have a look, because often we did allocate some days should extra meetings be required in previous years. Just one.
I believe there's only.
Okay.
I believe there's only one at the moment due to a very full calendar already, and we'll have to jiggle things around and work them in if an additional meeting is required.
And I think there's pros and cons for having those additional spare dates in Councillor Hunt, because as you recall, last year in particular, many of them were cancelled, and they were cancelled at quite short notice. And so, we've also got other business and other meeting schedules we're trying to keep up with as well. Councillor Gould.
Madam Chair, I'm looking at February. We've got the Easter trading submission going through. There's very few days available to hear them, and also the gaming submission process. Are we going to have to move some of the council meetings to allocate time?
Through Madam Chair, the gaming we haven't actually put out for wider consultation yet, so you still have to have a workshop and agree your process moving forward for that. As far as Easter trading's concerned, we're talking about having to identify some dates. I think it was towards the back end of February, mid to late February, to actually have a hearing of those submissions, and then we would also have it attached onto a council meeting for the decision-making process. So we may be trying to either, depending on the volume, or we're waiting to see what kind of numbers we've got before we decide whether it needs its own separate day or not.
Thank you. If there are no further, if there's no further discussion, I'm going to put recommendation 2, that the committee recommends that council resolves to adopt the schedule of meetings for the period the 1st of January 2017 to the 31st of December 2017, based on a monthly cycle, and that the following starting times are agreed to. That the Operations and Monitoring Committee meetings shall commence at 9:30 a.m, that the Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee meetings shall commence at 9:30 a.m, that the Council meetings shall commence at 9:30 a.m, that the extraordinary meetings shall be scheduled as required. It's been moved by Councillor Sturt, seconded by Councillor Gould. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you, carried. Thank you. Now, do we have to move to go into recess for lunch? I think we do, don't we? No, we don't have to. Thank you. Well, thank you. Can we take our lunch break now and resume at 1:30? Thank you.